My new husband let his teenage daughter humiliate me at dinner, then screamed that I had no say in his house. So, I quietly bought his entire kingdom while he slept, and watched his world crumble. Mia smiled at me from across the long mahogany dining table and said, with perfect, practiced cruelty, that I looked like the help. Richard, my husband of 8 months, didn't even flinch. He just laughed softly into his expensive crystal wine glass, not bothering to lift his eyes from his phone. I set my silver fork down on the linen napkin. I had spent 5 hours in that kitchen. I had prepared a beef Wellington from scratch, carefully wrapping the tenderloin in mushroom duxelles and prosciutto, scoring the crisp golden pastry exactly the way Richard had casually mentioned his grandmother used to do it for the holidays. The candles were lit, casting a warm glow over the dining room even though it was only a random Tuesday evening. His family's antique porcelain china was laid out with the meticulous, desperate care of a woman still foolishly trying to carve out a place for herself in a family that had already locked the doors. Mia, 19 years old and dripping in a sapphire tennis bracelet her father had purchased to apologize for missing her high school graduation, pushed her plate away like it was toxic waste. "I can't eat this," she announced. Her voice pitched loud enough to echo off the vaulted ceilings. "You'd think for someone living here completely free, you'd at least bother to learn how to cook something edible." She flipped her long blonde hair over her shoulder, her eyes entirely devoid of empathy. My own family sat frozen around that massive table. My mother, Diane, stared intently into her water glass as if the ice cubes held the secrets of the universe, desperately avoiding my gaze. My older sister, Clara, wouldn't lift her eyes off her lap. Nobody said a single word. Not one person intervened while a spoiled teenager tore into me as though I were temporary catering staff hired for the evening and found lacking. I finally spoke. My voice was calm, measured, and dangerously quiet. "Mia, there is a very distinct difference between having money and having manners. If you don't like the food I spent all afternoon preparing for you, you are more than free to leave the table." That was it. That was the entirety of my rebellion. Richard stood up so fast and with such violence that his heavy wooden chair screeched against the restored hardwood floors. He slammed his open palm down on the table hard enough to tip a wine glass. Dark red vintage Merlot bled into the pristine antique lace runner his mother had left him, staining it like an open wound. "Don't you ever dare lecture my daughter in my house," he roared, the veins in his neck bulging against his tailored collar. "This is my house. My money. My rules. You are a guest here, Elena, nothing more. Do not forget your place." Mia smirked into her glass, victorious, her chin tilted up like a young queen watching a peasant get publicly flogged. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mother actually mouth the word "times sorry times" to him. She was apologizing to my husband for the absolute crime of me asking a 19-year-old adult to use basic human decency. Nobody at that table defended me. Not one single person. I stood up, smoothed the wrinkles from my simple navy dress, and walked out of the dining room without saying another word. They all thought I was running upstairs to cry into my pillow. They thought I was retreating in shame. They had absolutely no idea what I was actually doing. Because every single person sitting at that table believed I was a modest, mid-level financial advisor, pulling in maybe $85,000 a year on a good year, driving a 7-year-old Honda Accord, and splitting grocery bills out of some kind of quiet, agreeable poverty. Richard had married me firmly believing he was rescuing a desperate, aging woman from a life of financial obscurity. What none of them knew, what I had never once volunteered in the 3 years we had known each other, was that I am the founder and CEO of a private equity fund managing close to $450 million in assets. I had built it in absolute silence over 12 years, entirely on purpose. I wanted a man who loved me, not my bank account, not my portfolio, and not my connections. Richard showed me exactly who he was the very moment he thought I had absolutely nothing to offer him but a warm body, a clean house, and a home-cooked dinner. Upstairs, I walked into my home office, locked the heavy oak door behind me, and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. I pulled out the ironclad prenuptial agreement he had practically forced me to sign 5 days before our wedding. I remembered sitting in his lawyer's sleek downtown Atlanta office while Richard tapped his Italian leather shoe against the floor, checking his Rolex, telling me it was just a formality. "Don't overthink it, Elena," he had said. He had made me waive absolutely everything. Spousal support was gone. Shared assets were gone. Any future claim on this magnificent, sprawling 6-bedroom estate on Oak Ridge Lane was entirely gone. He thought that document was an impenetrable shield protecting his precious empire from my greedy, middle-class hands. He never once considered that the very same document might do the exact opposite. 4 months earlier, my firm had quietly purchased his defaulted first mortgage off his original lender for pennies on the dollar. We did it through a Delaware-based shell entity called Aegis Holdings, a company he had never once heard of and would never have thought to look for. Every single rent and mortgage payment he believed he was sending to some faceless, corporate private lender on the East Coast was landing straight in my firm's accounts. He was paying me $2,000, $500 a month to live in his own house while calling it his kingdom. That night, I didn't sleep a single wink. I sat at my desk in the dark, the glow of my monitors illuminating the room. I was confirming every signature, every single obscure legal clause, and every recorded date. I cross-referenced the servicing file against the county assessor's public records until 3:30 inches the morning. By sunrise, I had a thick manila folder completely ready and a call already placed to my lead corporate attorney. Sylvia was a sharp, fiercely unbothered woman who had helped me build half the fund's holding structures. She answered on the first ring, even though it wasn't even 6:45 a.m. yet. At exactly 7 a.m., my office door swung open without so much as a knock. Richard walked in, still wearing last night's simmering rage like a cheap cologne. He was gripping a thick envelope like it was a weapon he had been sharpening all night long. "You really just don't get it, do you?" he sneered, dropping the envelope onto my desk with a heavy thud that made my morning coffee ripple in its mug. "Divorce papers. Standard issue. It enforces every single clause of that prenup you were so eager to sign." He leaned over the desk, invading my space, close enough that I could smell the stale wine and bitter coffee on his breath. "You walk away with absolutely nothing, Elena. Nothing." He straightened up, his chest puffed out, entirely certain he had already won the war. "You have 3 days, he commanded. "Pack your cheap, off-the-rack clothes and get out of my house before the weekend. If you are still here on Monday morning, I will personally have security drag you to the curb." He turned on his heel and walked out without waiting for a response, the heavy door bouncing off the wall behind him. He had absolutely no idea he had just handed me the final, perfect piece of leverage I needed. He wanted me gone in 3 days. I only needed 3 hours. By noon that same day, the house was already shaking with the heavy bass of awful music. Mia had thrown a massive impromptu party to celebrate my impending exit. Her friends were spilling sticky mixed drinks across the white leather sofas, muddy designer shoes were being tracked over the glass coffee tables, and expensive liquor from Richard's locked basement cellar was being poured carelessly into cheap red plastic cups. Mia intentionally bumped into my shoulder in the hallway, throwing her designer handbag at my chest. "Clean up this mess since you're getting kicked out anyway," she laughed, her friends giggling behind her. I didn't flinch. I didn't yell. I simply pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. I documented the timestamps, the physical damage to the property, the minors drinking hard liquor in plain view. One of them, a boy from Mia's private school named Jake, wasn't even 18 yet. Mia had no idea she was handing me the exact ammunition I needed to move faster and hit harder than Richard could have ever possibly imagined. That's when Tom and Clara pushed through the crowded living room toward me. Tom, my sister's husband, leaned against the marble kitchen counter, grinning like he had rehearsed his lines in the mirror. "Richard told us the good news," Tom sneered. "Divorce in 3 days. I already looked up a cheap little apartment for you on the south side of town. Roaches are probably included, but hey, at least it's on the bus line." Clara sighed, an exasperated, theatrical sound, and rested a patronizing hand on my shoulder. I shrugged it off instantly, my skin crawling. "Just apologize to him, Elena," she pleaded, though her voice lacked any real warmth. "Get on your knees and beg if you have to. It's a lot better than being homeless at your age." I looked at both of them. These were two people who had spent years riding the coattails of Richard's supposed wealth, showing up at his country club golf tournaments, drinking his wine, and calling themselves family at every single holiday dinner he hosted, completely ignoring my misery. "Keep that cheap landlord's number, Tom," I told him, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "You're going to need it a lot sooner than I will." Tom laughed out loud. He was absolutely certain I was bluffing. I turned, smiled directly at Mia, and said one quiet, devastating sentence that made her smug face drain of all color. 4 words she would repeat back to her father within the hour, twisted and hysterical. "I own this house." By the time I walked back upstairs to change out of that plain navy dress and into a tailored designer suit I had kept hidden in the back of my closet, the wheels I had set in motion the night before were already rolling toward Richard's front door faster than anyone in that house could possibly stop. I hadn't always been the kind of woman who could sit in a room, say 4 quiet words, and watch someone's face drain of color. 12 years ago, I was 31, freshly divorced from a man named Mark who had cheated on me with his much younger coworker. Mark had left me completely devastated, saddled with $22,000 in hidden credit card debt, and a tiny townhouse in downtown Atlanta that I couldn't afford on my own. I vividly remember standing in that cramped kitchen, doing desperate math on a paper napkin, crying until my eyes burned. I made a vow to myself that night. I would never, ever again be a woman who did not understand her own finances down to the absolute last penny. I remember calling my mother that same week, desperately hoping for a shred of comfort. Instead, Diane told me that maybe if I had been more present and attentive in the marriage, Mark wouldn't have strayed. That single comment taught me early on exactly how much backbone I could expect from my family when a man's comfort was on the line versus my own survival. I took an entry-level job at a boutique investment firm making $55,000 a year. I became obsessed. I learned absolutely everything I could about distressed debt, structured credit, and corporate restructuring. By the time I was 35, I had left that firm to start my own fund with 2 silent partners and $14 million in committed capital from a handful of brilliant investors who trusted my aggressive read on risk more than my modest resume. I kept my public profile completely non-existent on purpose. It was a habit born less out of humility and more out of a hard, brutal lesson from my first marriage, where every single dollar I earned had somehow become a weapon Mark used against me. He used my income either to guilt me for working too late or to justify his own reckless spending before I could even transfer it to savings. I decided then that the next man I let into my life would have to love the version of me that looked, on paper, like absolutely nothing special. I met Richard at a charity gala for the Atlanta Literacy Council almost 3 years ago. He was seated 2 tables over, laughing at something a business partner said with his head thrown back in a way that seemed unguarded, charming, and easy. He was 52. A highly successful commercial real estate developer with a supposedly massive portfolio of strip malls and mid-rise office buildings across Georgia and the Carolinas. He was recently divorced from Mia's mother, a woman named Vanessa, who had, according to Richard's dramatic telling, taken him to the cleaners in a vicious settlement that left him practically destitute. I would later learn that his definition of practically destitute meant he still owned a massive 6-bedroom estate on Oak Ridge Lane, a luxury speedboat, and a basement wine cellar worth considerably more than my first 3 cars combined. During our courtship, Richard courted me carefully. He sent expensive flowers on a Tuesday for no reason. He tucked handwritten notes into my coat pockets. He asked good questions and seemed to actually listen to the answers. After the barren wasteland of my first marriage, Richard felt like being handed a glass of ice water after a brutal trek through the desert. I told him I worked in finance, keeping my answers incredibly vague. He never pushed for details. Looking back, I understand now that he never pushed because he had already assumed the absolute ceiling on what I could possibly be. A quiet woman who worked in a cubicle, wore modest jewelry, and drove herself to dinner in an old Honda was, in his mind, already fully accounted for. There was no hidden depth to investigate because his ego had already decided there wasn't one. Mia was 17 when we first met, a junior at an elite private school. From the very first incredibly tense dinner, I understood exactly what I was walking into. She had been raised almost entirely by expensive nannies, private tutors, and a father who compensated for his chronic absence with massive infusions of cash. Richard missed her middle school graduation for a deal closing in Savannah, and sent her on a $4,500 shopping spree with his black card to make up for it. He missed her sweet 16 for a golf trip and sent the sapphire bracelet. Every absence became a transaction. Every transaction became, in Mia's mind, concrete evidence that money was the absolute only love language her father spoke fluently. I tried to be patient. I tried to build a bridge. I offered to help her study for her advanced economics exams, a subject I actually knew inside and out. She looked at me like I had offered her garbage. I have a tutor, she had sneered. A real one, not some desk clerk. I never offered again. The early warning signs of Richard's true nature were small enough to explain away individually, but damning in retrospect. 8 months before our wedding, at a dinner Richard hosted to introduce me to his wealthy business partners, Mia arrived 40 minutes late. She walked straight past me without a word and told her father, in front of 6 influential guests, that she needed $950 for a new pair of designer boots, or I'm not going to Aunt Sarah's thing this weekend. Richard didn't even pause his conversation. He simply pulled out his wallet, handed her the cash, and apologized to his guests for the interruption as though it were the weather. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach that night, but I pushed it down. Then came the financial trap. 6 weeks before the disastrous dinner party, Richard came to me with a request. A mixed-use retail project he was developing had run into a sudden financing gap. He needed a $75,000 bridge loan just until the next draw came through from his primary lender. He asked if I had any savings I could contribute, framing it beautifully as a partnership, as something husbands and wives did for each other to build a future. I told him I could scrape together $18,000. In truth, it was a microscopic fraction of what I had liquid access to, but to the version of myself he believed he had married, it represented nearly my entire life savings. He took the $18,000 without a second thought. 2 weeks later, he bought Mia a used BMW for her 19th birthday, dropping $20,000 cash at a luxury dealership. When I gently pointed out the timeline, a wife handing over her life savings for a business emergency while a luxury car materialized out of thin air weeks later, he exploded. He told me I was keeping score, which he called toxic and manipulative. He said if I wanted to be treated like a real partner, I should stop acting like a stingy accountant. I remember standing in the cold garage, apologizing to him, wondering how I had become the villain. That was when I started digging. I discovered, entirely by accident while organizing some files for his tax returns, that Richard had taken out a massive second mortgage on the Oak Ridge Lane house. 8 months before we had even met, he was significantly further behind on the payments than the rosy financial picture he had painted for me. I didn't confront him. I filed the information quietly, utilizing the exact same ruthless instinct that had built a $450 million fund out of nothing. I started paying much closer attention to the paperwork. That is when I noticed the loan servicer's name. It was a firm I recognized from an entirely different corporate context. I didn't buy that defaulted mortgage out of some grand, malicious strategic vision from the very beginning. I bought it because I was exhausted. I bought it because I finally had concrete proof in black and white that the arrogant man who called me a guest in his own house had been quietly drowning in massive, unmanageable debt the entire time he condescended to me about my modest salary. My forensic accountant, a brilliant and unglamorous man named Marcus, walked me through the file line by line over a secure phone call. He read me the modification dates, the extensive missed payment history, and the formal notice of default filed 8 weeks before our wedding invitations had even gone out. I remember sitting perfectly still at my desk, feeling less like a betrayed wife and more like a predatory analyst who had just found the load-bearing flaw in a structure everyone else assumed was indestructible. But it was Marcus's second discovery, made just hours after Richard slammed the divorce papers on my desk, that changed the entire shape of the war. Marcus called me back at 1:15 p.m., his voice tight with anticipation. The second mortgage on Oak Ridge Lane hadn't been taken out to cover a business shortfall like Richard had implied. It had been taken out in the immediate aftermath of his divorce from Vanessa, to pay a legally mandated settlement obligation he had hidden from absolutely everyone. Buried deep in the servicing notes was a court filing. A modification agreement tied to the divorce decree revealed that Vanessa, the ex-wife, had actually been awarded partial ownership interest in the Oak Ridge Lane property itself. It was structured through a highly complicated refinance meant to buy her out quietly over 5 years. Richard had missed 4 of those buyout payments. Vanessa's aggressive attorney had already filed a formal notice of default against him 2 months before our wedding. Richard had married me, forced me to waive my rights through that insulting prenup, and never once mentioned that his own ex-wife held a massive legal claim on the very house he had just threatened to throw me out of. The man who screamed that it was his house, his money, and his rules didn't even fully own the damn house. He had been so blindly arrogant, so certain of his own unquestionable kingdom, that he never once checked to see if the walls were still his. I sat with that revelation for a long moment, feeling something fundamental shift inside my chest. This wasn't just a man who had let his spoiled daughter humiliate his wife at dinner. This was a man who had spent years building a fragile fortress out of debt he refused to look at, propping the whole rotting structure up with other people's money and other people's silence. My silence most recently. Vanessa's before that. I called Sylvia back and told her to file the eviction notice immediately. The confrontation happened that evening in Richard's mahogany-paneled study. Tom and Clara were still lingering in the kitchen, drinking his expensive scotch, because Richard had specifically asked them to stay. He wanted an audience for what he assumed would be my tearful, pathetic surrender. Mia stood in the doorway of the study, her arms crossed tight over her chest, her earlier party bravado dulled into something much more watchful now that my 4 quiet words had reached her ears. Richard sat behind his massive executive desk like a judge behind a bench, gesturing vaguely for me to sit in the small chair across from him as though I were a delinquent tenant coming to beg for a rent extension. "I hope you've finally come to your senses, Elena," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Some lawyer named Sylvia called my attorney an hour ago talking nonsense about liens and corporate holding companies. I don't know what kind of pathetic stunt you think you're pulling, but it ends tonight. You're leaving." "It's not a stunt," I said. I didn't sit down. I stayed standing, looking down at him. "4 months ago, my private equity firm purchased your defaulted first mortgage on this property. Every single rent check you've been sending to that lender in Delaware has been coming directly into my corporate accounts." Tom let out a low, mocking whistle from the doorway. Clara reached for the back of a leather chair like she suddenly needed physical support. Richard's mouth opened and closed once, like a dying fish, before any words came out. "You've been paying me $2,500 a month," I said, my voice ringing clear and cold in the quiet room, "to live in a house that I already own." The room went dead silent. Tom, leaning in the doorway, actually laughed a short, disbelieving bark before he saw the absolute terror dawn on Richard's face and abruptly stopped. "That's not legally possible," Richard stammered, but his booming voice had completely lost its floor. The arrogant bass was gone, replaced by a thin, reedy panic. "It is fully recorded with the county," I replied smoothly. "Sylvia can send you the file number tonight if you'd like to verify it yourself. But that's not actually why I'm here right now. I am here because of the second mortgage. The one you secretly took out to cover Vanessa's settlement. The one you've missed 4 payments on. The one where she still holds partial ownership of this house. A fact you never disclosed to Mia, to me, or apparently even to your own accountant." Mia's arms uncrossed. She dropped them to her sides, her jaw slackening. She looked at her father, really looked at him, for what I suspect was the first time in a decade without a financial demand attached to the look. "What is she talking about, Dad?" Mia's voice had none of its usual theatrical performance. For a brief second, She looked exactly like a frightened child waiting for the adult in the room to make the monsters go away. Richard's face did something I had never seen it do in 3 years. It completely emptied. The bravado, the ego, the unearned confidence, it all vanished, leaving behind a hollow, terrified old man. Mia, honey, that's not. She's twisting things. She doesn't understand high-level commercial financing. Then, explain it, Mia yelled, her voice cracking in a way that startled me. Explain why Mom owns part of this house. Explain why you told me last year we might have to sell the boat because of her. She pointed an accusatory finger at me. Is she telling the truth? Richard didn't have an explanation ready because he had never once expected to need one. He had built his entire authority on the assumption that nobody would ever dare check his math. I looked at him, feeling absolutely nothing but cold, sterile pity. You told me I had no say in your house, I said, repeating his words from the dinner table. You were absolutely right. I don't, because as of 12 weeks ago, it isn't your house. It is mine. And you have exactly 3 days to pack your cheap wine and get out, or I will have my security drag you to the curb. Nobody in that room defended him. Not Tom, who had gone completely pale against the doorframe, clearly doing rapid mental math about the thousands of dollars in investments he had handed over to Richard that he was never going to see again. Not Clara, who wouldn't meet my eyes. But also, for the first time all evening, wouldn't look at Richard either. And certainly not Mia, who turned on her heel and walked out of the study without another word, her heavy footsteps thudding on the stairs. She was a girl learning in real time that the grand kingdom she had been raised inside was nothing but a house of cards, and the king was a fraud. The days that followed unfolded with a brutal, clinical speed that left Richard entirely paralyzed. His attorney called Sylvia the next morning, aggressively demanding to see the recorded deed. Within 2 hours, the attorney was forced to acknowledge, with visible, grinding reluctance, that absolutely everything I had said was legally bulletproof. Richard tried briefly to fight it. He hired a second, much more expensive attorney to argue that the acquisition of his mortgage by his own wife's firm constituted some kind of marital conflict of interest or bad faith. Sylvia dismantled the claim inside of a single, devastatingly worded letter. She pointed out that Aegis Holdings had purchased the note from a third-party seller in a standard arm's-length transaction 12 weeks before Richard had ever threatened me with divorce papers. There was absolutely nothing legally improper about it. There was only the humiliating fact that I had known something he didn't, and I had outplayed him at his own game. Vanessa, Mia's mother, reached out to me directly 9 days after the confrontation. That surprised me more than almost anything else. She had heard about the mortgage from Mia, who had apparently called her hysterical that same night. Vanessa wanted to understand exactly how much of the house's equity had actually been protected under her original settlement, because Richard's missed payments meant her own buyout was now severely at risk. We met for coffee in a quiet shop off Providence Road. We were two women who, by all societal rules, should have hated each other on principle. Instead, we sat comparing notes on a man who had lied to both of us in remarkably similar, pathetic ways. Vanessa told me things about their marriage that reframed Mia for me entirely. She explained how Richard had used money as an apology for years, how he had refused family therapy, calling it an unnecessary expense the same year he bought a luxury speedboat. I left that conversation with significantly less anger toward Mia, and a profound, chilling disgust for the man who had shaped her into a weapon. My mother's reaction disappointed me in a way I am still working through. Diane called 2 days after the eviction notice was served. She didn't call to ask how I was holding up. She called to ask whether I thought I had been a little too harsh with Richard, and whether there was still a way to smooth things over before the holidays so the family wouldn't have to awkwardly pick sides. I told her, as gently as I could manage, that I hadn't asked anyone to pick a side the night Mia called me the help, and that nobody at that table had picked mine anyway. She went completely quiet for a long time. Finally, she offered a small, halting apology. It wasn't a full accounting of her betrayal, but I accepted it because I realized Diane had spent 30 years married to a man who taught her that keeping the peace was worth more than her own dignity. Unlearning that at 65 wasn't going to happen over one phone call. Tom and Clara's allegiance, which I had expected to remain firmly with Richard given their shared love of his country club, fractured entirely within 2 weeks. Not out of any sudden loyalty to me, but out of the horrifying discovery that Richard had been quietly borrowing money from Tom as well. Tom showed up at my office unannounced, looking incredibly sheepish, asking if I had any financial advice on how to legally extract $25,000 from a man now facing total foreclosure. I looked at my brother-in-law, remembered his smug face at the party, and told him exactly what I had told him that day. You should have kept that cheap landlord's number. He didn't find it funny the second time. Richard's desperation peaked in the 3rd week. When all his legal avenues failed, he tried calling me directly late one night. His voice had gone soft and pleading, slipping back into the charming register I hadn't heard since the charity gala. He told me he still loved me. He begged me for 90 days to refinance, catch up on Vanessa's buyout, and save the marriage. I listened to the entire pathetic speech without interrupting. When he finally ran out of breath, I told him gently that I believed he loved something, But it wasn't me. He loved having a blind, quiet wife who didn't ask questions. I told him that version of me had died at his dinner table over cold beef Wellington, and I had no interest in resurrecting her for his convenience. I hung up and blocked his number. The divorce was finalized 14 weeks after that dinner. Under the strict terms of the ironclad prenup he had insisted upon, I walked away with absolutely nothing from the marriage itself, exactly as he had designed it. However, because Aegis Holdings was a pre-existing corporate entity, my firm retained full ownership of the Oak Ridge Lane property. Richard was formally evicted. He owed money to my firm, to his ex-wife, and to my brother-in-law. His credit was destroyed, his reputation in the local commercial real estate market was in tatters, and his daughter had finally seen him for exactly what he was. Mia moved in with Vanessa permanently that fall. She transferred from her elite $60,000 a year private university to a state school much closer to home. According to Vanessa, the reality check has done more for Mia's temperament than any amount of private tutoring ever did. I don't know if Mia and I will ever speak again, and I am entirely at peace with that. I wasn't the villain in her story, but I was never going to be anything but an obstacle, either. I still live in the massive house on Oak Ridge Lane, though I have repainted the hallways and replaced Richard's oppressive family portraits with the bright watercolors I bought in Asheville years ago. I sleep soundly in a room where nobody is watching to see if I belong. I sold the speedboat. I kept the antique china. Strangely enough, it was never really his grandmother's fault what her grandson became, and good porcelain shouldn't have to answer for the sins of the people who eat off it. I use the china now on ordinary Tuesdays, for no special occasion at all. It feels like its own quiet, beautiful form of justice. The plates that once sat under my greatest humiliation are now just plates again, holding whatever simple meal I have made for myself, and absolutely no one else. I hear through the grapevine that Richard moved into a cramped rental apartment on the south side of town, ironically, not far from the bus line Tom had suggested for me. He has started dating again, spinning a brand new, tragic narrative to a new woman who doesn't yet know to ask to see his financial statements. People ask me sometimes if I regret staying quiet for so long about who I really was and what I was really worth. I don't. Not even a little bit. There is a very specific, crystalline wisdom that only comes from being deeply underestimated for a long time. You get to watch, clearly and without any interference, exactly who a person becomes when they truly believe no one is keeping score. Richard showed me his true kingdom the night he screamed that I had no say in his house. He just never imagined that I had already bought the deed while he was too busy laughing into his wine to notice the walls changing hands beneath him. Edit. A few of you asked how Richard's original lender sold the mortgage without him knowing. It's standard practice in distressed commercial and residential debt. The bank bundles bad loans and sells them at a massive discount to private equity firms to clear their books. Richard just received a standard boilerplate notice in the mail that his loan servicer had changed. Because he was so arrogant and so deeply in denial about his debt, he never bothered to look up the parent company of his new servicer. If he had, he would have seen my name sitting right at the top of the LLC registry. I was left at the altar when my fiancée ran off with my brother. 2 years later, she asked for my help, claiming she now saw the toxicity of my family. 2 years ago, I stood at the altar, ashamed and heartbroken. My fiancée ditched me an hour before the wedding and took off with my brother. I never saw it coming, or perhaps I overlooked the warning signs because I adored her. We had been together for 5 years, and I assumed we were happy. However, looking back, it is evident that I was unaware of many things. My family never treated me as a priority. My parents always favored my brother. He was the golden child, attractive, wealthy, and the type of guy everyone gravitated toward. I was the quieter one, always being compared to him, making me feel like I didn't measure up. Growing up, I was always asked why I couldn't be more like my brother. Or your brother did it, why can't you? I expected things to change as we got older, but they didn't. If anything, things grew worse. My fiancée had everything I wanted in a partner: intelligent, attractive, and determined. However, she had a selfish side. It wasn't clear at first. It manifested itself in little ways, such as insisting on always getting her way or never apologizing when she wounded my feelings. I dismissed it because I loved her and believed we were creating a life together. I never expected her to betray me the way she did. The wedding was meant to be the best day of my life. Everything was ready: the venue, the food, and the guests. I awoke nervous yet delighted, knowing that I would soon begin a new chapter with the lady I loved. Then, 1 hour before the ceremony, she called me. Her voice was calm, almost frigid, when she told me she couldn't do it. She stopped loving me. Then she revealed the true bombshell. She had been dating someone else. That person was my brother. She didn't even appear guilty about it. She stated she didn't want to hurt me, but she felt compelled to follow her heart. I didn't even have time to digest what she said before hanging up. My parents, who had already arrived at the event, knew. My brother had told them earlier in the morning. Instead of supporting me, they tried to keep things calm to avoid humiliating themselves. When I addressed them, they defended her. They said things like, maybe it's for the best, and you don't want to marry someone who doesn't love you. My mother even had the arrogance to advise that I be happy for them. My father was no better, he simply stood there and ordered me to keep it together. It wasn't until later that I discovered my parents' involvement in all of this. My brother had always been interested in her, and they seemed to think she was too good for me. They decided she would be a better fit for him. They had been urging her to select him for months, even offering her financial support if she left me for him. I had no clue my family could be that deceptive. I walked out of the venue that day without looking back. I left everything behind, including my family, friends, and hometown. I couldn't stand being near any of them. I went to another state and started again. I got a job, a little apartment, and spent the next 2 years repairing my life. At first, it was difficult. I knew no one, and the loneliness was overwhelming. But as time passed, I discovered serenity. I met new people, began treatment, and concentrated on myself for the first time in my life. I did not inform anyone where I was or how to reach me. I didn't want anything to do with those who had deceived me. Then, 2 years later, my ex-fiancée arrived at my home. I had just returned home from work, and when I opened the door, I could scarcely recognize her. She appeared fatigued and worn out, as if she hadn't slept or eaten properly in days. Her once confident and polished manner was gone. She shook and her eyes were red from sobbing. She told me that living with my brother had become a nightmare. He was manipulative, emotionally abusive, and disloyal. Behind closed doors, the beloved golden child turned out to be a monster. They had married shortly after our wedding catastrophe and had a child together, but their relationship had crumbled. My parents, who had previously been so willing to assist her, turned against her when she failed to achieve their expectations. She stated that she felt caged, alone, and terrified. She intended to divorce my brother but was scared of what he may do. He possessed money, contacts, and a vicious streak. She was afraid he would wreck her finances and take their child away. She approached me because she believed I could assist. She asked me to testify in court about how toxic and manipulative my family was. She believed my testimony would boost her case and help her keep custody of her child. I stood there, listening to her, angry. She had made her decisions. She knew exactly what kind of person my brother was, yet she picked him over me. She allowed my family to manipulate her and went away without looking back. And now, after everything she has put me through, she expects me to come to her rescue. I told her no. I did not yell or quarrel, I just said no. I closed the door, it felt nice. But it did not last. A few days later, the texts began. She managed to spread the news about her arrival. Old friends and even mutual acquaintances began reaching out to me. They labeled me selfish, spiteful, and cowardly for refusing to assist a woman in need. Her former maid of honor, the same girl who was meant to support her at our wedding, sent me a lengthy note about how I was not man enough to step up. She claimed I was confirming my family's point. That I was weak and did not deserve my ex in the first place. I couldn't believe their arrogance. These people had departed from my life following the wedding. None of them had spoken up for me back then, but now they believed they had the right to lecture me. I disregarded the majority of it, but it still stung. They had no idea what I had gone through. They didn't care. They simply wanted me to fix a situation that was not mine to fix. Now I'm wondering if I did the proper thing. I owe my ex-fiancée nothing. She created her bed, and now she must lie in it. But there's a youngster involved. An innocent child who didn't pick this situation. Part of me wonders if my refusal to assist will harm him in the long run. At the same time, aiding her would mean reintroducing my family and her drama into my life. And I am not sure I am willing to do it. Reddit, what would you have done in my position? Did I make the right decision, or am I also selfish? Update 1. I honestly didn't anticipate my post to get so viral. To be honest, when I originally started penning things out, I had no idea if anyone would care. But now I'm reading through hundreds of comments, some helpful, some difficult to read, and it's been a lot to comprehend. Thank you to everyone who has offered advice or simply expressed their thoughts. Whether you agree with me or not, I appreciate your support and diverse viewpoints. Writing all of this out has definitely helped me go through a lot of emotions and gain some clarity. But it's also brought out a lot of feelings I thought I'd buried deep down. After posting, I spent the rest of the evening reading the comments. Some individuals brought up points I hadn't considered, such as the possibility that getting engaged in my ex-fiancée's legal difficulties may exacerbate the situation. Not only for me, but for the child as well. Others were more direct, instructing me to keep as far away as possible. She created her bed. Now she may lie in it. Those statements helped me feel better about my first reaction to her turning up at my home. But then there were the ones who mentioned something different. The child. I know I don't owe anything to my ex-fiancé. But hearing so many people say, the child is innocent in all of this, really got to me. Many of you suggested that I try to do something for the kid without being drawn back into the poisonous mess that is my family. And it is what I have been struggling with ever since. I don't want anything to do with her or my brother again. I don't want to be the hero or decent guy in a situation where I'm only setting myself up for further heartbreak. But at the same time, I feel compelled to do something, even if it isn't for her. It's funny though. After reading so many of your comments, I began to wonder if there was anything I could do that wouldn't need me to communicate with her again or get dragged back into the drama. I even pondered phoning a lawyer to see what would happen if I testified or aided in some manner. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized. It's still not my responsibility to change anything. And especially not if it involves interacting with my poisonous family again. However, the guilt of knowing that the child is trapped in the center of this chaos persists. Then, like clockwork, my brother reappeared in the image. The email. Yesterday morning, I received an email from him. Yes, my brother, the one I haven't spoken to in 2 years. The last time we did this was when I canceled my wedding. His email was frigid, and simply reading it made my stomach plummet. It was short and to the point. I heard our ex-fiancé asked you for aid. This is a tremendous error. If you become interested, keep out of family matters. You'll regret it. I stared at the message for much too long. I was inclined to respond, but then I thought, why the hell should I? This guy is the one who forced me out of my own life. He was the one who perpetrated all of this manipulation with my ex. And now he believes he can tell me what to do? The arrogance. To be honest, I'm not sure if the word audacity is strong enough to describe how I feel about him. But I did not answer. I could not be bothered. It's almost funny how entitled he still feels. He has no idea what I've been through or what I've had to deal with over the years, and yet he believes he gets to decide how I should handle things. Thanks. That was when the phone rang. An unknown number. And I am sure you can guess who it was. Yep. My mother. After 2 years of silence, she finally decided to phone me. The moment I picked up the phone and heard her voice, I was reminded of all the reasons I'd cut ties with her and my father. I didn't even get a "how have you been?" or "I miss you" before she got right into it. She began discussing the divorce, my brother, and how I needed to be the bigger person and maintain peace for the benefit of the family. That's when I snapped. I don't recall what I said, but I know I told her I didn't want to hear it anymore. She went on, however, about how difficult things were for my brother and how I was punishing the child by not intervening. I told her I didn't care and wasn't going to fix their mess anymore. I hung up after that. That conversation made me numb. For some reason, it reminded me of everything my parents had done to me, how they always favored my brother, how they tolerated his worst conduct, and how they always expected me to be the quiet one who simply accepted everything they threw at me. It has never been about me. Not once. I've always been the backup son, expected to deal with whatever trash came my way. Hearing my mother defend my brother again was like getting slapped in the face. It made me realize that nothing had changed, not with my parents or with him. And to be honest, it is why I am not returning. As tempting as it is to take the moral high ground, I know I'd only be perpetuating the toxic cycle. So, I'm finished. I've made peace with going away, but this situation has resurfaced many old scars that I thought were healed. As much as I want to block everything out and pretend it's not happening, I can't ignore the reality that the child is caught in the center of it all. I keep thinking about how helpless he must feel as he watches everything unfold. I know he is innocent, but what if he is being emotionally manipulated, as my ex was? It kills me just thinking about it. Still, I keep telling myself that this is not my struggle. I've already been through enough, and I'm not about to be drawn back into their drama. I've been sitting with these emotions for a few days, trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wants to just move on, leave them to their mess, and walk away forever. But there's another part of me that wonders if I can aid the child without getting sucked back into the fray. I'm not sure what the correct move is yet. But I do know one thing: I cannot allow myself to return to the person I was before. The one who was always trying to make everything better for everyone else while ignoring my own needs. I worked way too hard to get here to be dragged back in. But the remorse over the child? Yes, it is still there. And it isn't going away anytime soon. How would you handle my situation? Would you help, Or would you just walk away? I'm having trouble finding the right balance. Update 2. I figured things would calm down following my last update, but I was mistaken. Instead, things have become even worse, and I'm honestly wondering how I put up with these individuals for so long. I feel like the universe is putting my determination to the test. Every time I believe I've erected a tall enough wall to keep them out, someone finds a way to sneak over it or slip through a crack. Since my mother's call, I've been completely inundated. It began with a few texts from my extended family, including aunts, uncles, and cousins. And now it appears that they have all established a single front. They're coming at me from all sides, accusing me of damaging the family by not supporting my brother, or, worse, by remaining out of his family problems, despite the fact that I am doing just that. It's as if they believe I'm bound to get engaged simply because we share blood. Some of them have even accused me of holding a grudge and not being a man about it. I've been working hard over the last 2 years to restore my life and move on from the toxic disaster they created. They now believe I should abandon everything in order to return to the drama. It is exhausting. They don't understand that leaving away was not a choice made out of spite, but out of necessity. I couldn't keep living in that familial dynamic. It was suffocating. But they do not want to hear that. To them, family means unwavering commitment, even if it means sacrificing your happiness and well-being. On top of all the familial drama, I've begun receiving emails from my ex-fiancée. She's been sending them every few days now. I initially ignored them but ultimately caved in and opened one. I almost wished I hadn't, because they were all identical. She begs me to reconsider, emphasizing how much I can help her and her child. Each email is more urgent than the last, and she has even started sending photos of the child. I understand she's in a bad predicament, but the entire situation feels exploitative. She knows I'm not heartless, and I believe she's attempting to use that against me. She seems to know that if she tugs on my heartstrings, I will give in. The thing is, I am not stupid. I see what she is doing. But I can't deny it makes me feel guilty. I did not ask for those photos, and I did not want them. But she knows I'll look at them, and the child's face in those photos, with his little eyes looking up at me, guilt trips me more than anything else. I can't shake the feeling that I'm letting him down, although knowing that not becoming engaged is the correct thing to do. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse, one of my old acquaintances contacted me unexpectedly. He's someone I haven't communicated with in years, but he obviously heard about the scenario through the grapevine. He called me late one evening, and when his name appeared on the screen, I almost didn't respond. I wasn't in the mood for another, "you should do the right thing" conversation, but I answered anyway. He didn't even waste time exchanging pleasantries. He stepped straight in, telling me to be the larger person and aid my ex-fiancée, even if it was simply to safeguard the child. He went on to say that I couldn't just let a child suffer because of my brother's actions. I'm not sure if he didn't comprehend the whole picture or if he just didn't care, but it was evident to me that he expected me to help simply because it was the moral thing to do. He depicted me as a monster for not immediately going to her rescue. I told him I couldn't help and that the matter was between her, my brother, and my family, not me. But he didn't hear it. He accused me of being stubborn, carrying grudges, and neglecting this child's needs. He made it sound as if I was abandoning someone who was obviously in need. But here's the thing, she's not the only person in need. I've spent so many years in this toxic environment, dealing with everyone else's problems but never my own. I am done with that. I quickly stopped the call, but it only made me feel more conflicted. I wanted to defend myself and explain why I wasn't going to get involved, but I didn't. I understand it is not my obligation to clean up this mess. I understand she and her family made their decisions, and they now have to live with them. But the guilt is still there. No matter how hard I try, it's been difficult to focus on anything else lately. I find myself questioning everything. I went out with some friends the other day to distract myself from the situation, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. One of them even joked that I was being a good Samaritan by not getting involved, which made me laugh. But it wasn't amusing. It only made me feel even more alienated. My buddies don't truly comprehend what I'm going through. The few friends I have left from my old life are either too afraid to speak up or simply believe I am doing the right thing. However, it does not feel right. Especially when a child is involved. I've also been thinking about how my ex-fiancée's situation could worsen if my brother and parents continue to press for full custody. I'm honestly not sure what could happen. My family has always been adept at manipulating the system, and I've witnessed them do so previously. I'm concerned that the youngster will be placed in a circumstance that is as horrible, if not worse, than what he is now suffering with. Despite these sentiments, I can't bring myself to get personally involved. So, I am still stuck. Part of me continues thinking that remaining out of it is the proper decision. But another part of me is questioning if I'm making the wrong decision. Will I live in regret if I don't help? And if I do help, would it only lead me back into their toxic world? This is a no-win situation. What would you do in my shoes? Would you aid the child, even if it meant reconnecting with your poisonous family again? Or would you keep your distance and let them sort things out for themselves? Update 3. After reading more of your comments and reflecting on the situation, I realized I couldn't sit back and do nothing. For the sake of the child. While I owe nothing to my ex-fiancé or my family, I understood that the child did not choose to be born into this situation. He is innocent. And if I have the means to help him escape the toxic environment that my brother and family have created, I should try. But I also realized that if I was going to do something, I needed to keep my peace in the process. I will not let them take me back into their world. I've worked too hard to rebuild my life and set boundaries, and I'm not going to give it all up for something out of my control. So I spent a lot of time thinking about it. Eventually, I came up with what I thought was the best compromise. I submitted an anonymous report to Child Protective Services, CPS. At first, I was unsure whether this was the proper decision. But as I thought about it more, it seemed evident that this was the only way I could possibly help without getting dragged back into the pandemonium. One evening, I sat down with all of the information I had. What my ex-fiancé had told me about my brother's behavior, how my parents treated her, and how toxic and manipulative the family dynamic had always been. I added all pertinent detail I could think of. I didn't simply talk about the physical and mental trauma my ex-fiancé had experienced. I also discussed how my brother's dominating behavior had impacted everyone around him, particularly her. I detailed how he had always used his charm to trick everybody, including my parents, into turning a blind eye to what he did. I made sure to explain how my parents had always supported him, making excuses for him and putting me aside in the process. I realized that if CPS was to investigate the incident, they would need to grasp the entire context of the child's surroundings. My brother's behavior was not the only issue. My family had always opted to enable his acts rather than hold him accountable. I also attached screenshots of some of the emails my ex-fiancée sent me. She had expressed her fear for herself and the child, her sense of being imprisoned in the marriage, and her lack of a support system. I knew I didn't have first-hand evidence of abuse against the child, but I hoped CPS would find enough in what I presented to launch an investigation. They might not be able to locate enough to intervene, but they would at least be aware of the situation. I needed to know that someone was watching out for the child, even if it wasn't me. Filing that report felt like a weight was lifted off my chest. It was the proper thing to do, but I didn't have to return to the craziness of my old life. I informed CPS that I wanted to remain anonymous and did not want to be contacted for follow-ups or participate in the case in any way. I did not want my name mentioned. I just wanted to make sure the kid was secure, and I felt if CPS thought my report had merit, they'd look into it further without my involvement. I did not expect immediate feedback or closure. CPS was unlikely to provide me with updates, and if they did, it would most likely be after they had done an inquiry. I was at ease knowing that I had done everything I could. I didn't have to reopen old wounds from my family's dysfunction, nor did I have to get caught up in their drama. At the end of the day, the report was the most effective thing I could do without jeopardizing my mental health or the life I'd worked so hard to rebuild. In the days that followed, I attempted to concentrate on moving forward, which is easier said than done. My family is relentless, and every time I think they'll leave me alone, another message or email appears. This time, it wasn't simply my mother and a distant cousin. This time, my brother reached out. And honestly, I didn't know how to answer. He sent me a short email accusing me of betraying the family and acting vindictively. He told me I was making a major mistake and would regret it. But there was something else about the tone of the message that made me pause for a moment. It wasn't simply anger. He was concerned. I did not even bother responding. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that everything he said was pure manipulation. It was not about him. It was about control. And I wasn't about to fall for it again. I've done this song and dance previously. It is always the same. They try to make me feel awful about setting boundaries and doing the right thing. But, in the end, they're the ones who caused this mess. I don't owe them an explanation anymore, for anything. I hadn't heard from my ex-fiancée in a few days, which was a relief, until yesterday, when I received one final email from her. It was short. Just a simple message that read, "Thank you. And I'm sorry for what I put you through." There are no details. No explanations. Only those words. It left me with mixed emotions. On the one hand, I'm relieved she acknowledged the pain she caused. But on the other hand, it made me realize how much she is going through. Perhaps something has changed in her situation, or she is finally recognizing the truth of her predicament. Regardless, it's evident that she's still battling. I don't know what will happen next in her custody struggle, but if there's even a slim chance she can get the child out of that harmful atmosphere, I hope it goes well for her. But I have to tell myself that I cannot get back engaged. I can't solve her problems. And I've already contributed significantly. Now it is up to the authorities. If CPS investigates and finds sufficient evidence to act, I will have done my part. If not, I'll have to admit that I can't control everything, no matter how much I want to. Final update. Thank you to everyone who has provided advice, encouragement, and even tough love. Your words helped me understand the big picture and gave me the confidence to act without second-guessing myself. And to anyone reading this who may be in a similar situation, it's okay to keep your peace. You can care for others while still maintaining your boundaries. Doing the right thing can sometimes entail taking a step back and allowing the system to work. You don't have to repair everything yourself. Do what you can and leave the rest to people who are more qualified to manage it. I'm not sure what will happen next, with my ex-fiancé, my brother, or any of this mess. But I know one thing. Whatever happens, I will be fine. I discovered my parents stole my $200,000 trust fund to support my sister. When I exposed them, they got furious and kicked me out of the house. To provide some context, my sister Corey has Down syndrome. She is 4 years older than me, and I've known for as long as I can remember that my sister was different from me in many ways. Even as a small child, I noted that Corey would respond strongly to every circumstance. If things didn't go her way, even in minor ways, she would scream and weep in a manner that most children did not. It was as if she couldn't take the frustration of things not living up to her expectations. Growing up, Corey had no pals. She had difficulty picking up on social cues and frequently came across as abrupt or even rude. While she wasn't trying to be impolite, her directness could be off-putting to other children who didn't comprehend her situation. As a result, many youngsters preferred to maintain their distance, leaving her feeling alienated. As a result, my parents made it a point to include me in her social life, frequently reminding me that I needed to bring her along when I went out with my friends. I realized they wanted her to feel included and have someone to interact with, so I didn't mind having my elder sister along. I felt it would be wonderful for her to have some company, and perhaps even make a few friends through my own social circles. However, spending time with Corey in the company of my friends was not easy. Her social skills were weak, and she struggled to integrate into groups. She often acted out in unexpected ways. She would occasionally push or even strike other children, especially if they had something she wanted. As a result, over time, my pals were less interested in hanging out with me if Corey was also around. They didn't want to deal with her unpredictable behavior, and I understood why. They were merely kids who wanted to play without interruptions or outbursts of hostility. Corey's impatience and inclination to lash out made things difficult for everyone, and I couldn't blame my friends for backing away from those circumstances. I understood that, as her sister, I had a responsibility to support and be there for Corey, especially given her struggles. But, to be honest, I needed space to mature, find my own friends, and live my life independently. However, my parents never let me be myself. Whenever I wanted to go something alone or spend time with my friends without Corey, they made me feel awful for even considering leaving her behind. They'd say things like, "Sisters should stick together," or "You need to think about Corey, she's your sister." It was as if they expected me to always choose her over my friends or anybody else, no matter what I wanted or needed for myself. What made things worse was that they never seemed to put these same efforts into assisting Corey comprehend how to change her conduct or develop her social skills. They never sat her down to explain why sharing or being compassionate with others could help her connect with others more effectively. Instead, they seemed to accept that I would fill in all of the gaps in her social life. So, throughout the years, I became Corey's lone buddy by default. Don't get me wrong, I adore Corey. She is family, and I recognize that none of this is her fault. I understand she confronts her own set of obstacles every day, and I can't imagine what it's like to be in her shoes. But, at the same time, do you know how it feels to be the invisible child in a family? My parents' entire world revolved around Corey, with every choice, idea, and money intended to make her life easier and more comfortable. Corey requires ongoing attention and specialized care. My parents have spent a lot of money on her numerous therapies over the years, including physiotherapy to help with her physical coordination, speech therapy to improve her communication, and occupational therapy to help her develop motor skills and independence. She also gets regular checkups, medical tests, and evaluations to track her progress and keep her health in control. The care she requires is considerable and time-consuming. While I fully grasp its significance, it frequently felt as if there was little place for me. One of Corey's specific issues is her lack of impulse control, which makes understanding boundaries difficult. For example, she is obsessed with the color pink and enjoys anything pink. She is instantly drawn to anything in that color. She feels impelled to seize it, hold it, and not let go. It doesn't matter whether it's a pink pocketbook, a teddy bear, a piece of clothes, or someone else's prized possessions. Once it's in her hands, she clings to it, and if anyone attempts to take it away, she bursts into tears, sometimes having a full-fledged breakdown. This tendency has resulted in numerous unpleasant situations, particularly while we are out in public. My parents frequently have to bargain with individuals or buy these pink trinkets from complete strangers simply to get Corey to calm down. I've seen them pay for a variety of strange pink items, some of which are worthless to us but mean everything to Corey at the time. I understand why they do it, and I understand that it's more than a wish for her. It's practically a need over which she has no control. However, watching my parents devote so much time, money, and mental energy to soothing her urges and satisfying her demands has left me feeling forgotten. Furthermore, my parents' approach to parenting Corey has had serious ramifications over the years. Their method of keeping her satisfied has devolved into what I can only describe as a shopping addiction. For Corey, it began simply enough. Every weekend, my parents would purchase her something pink. A toy, a piece of jewelry, or another trinket, to keep her happy and as a bargaining chip for her cooperation throughout the week. My parents would tell Corey that she had to be a good girl, if she wanted them to give her whatever she wanted, and she would instantly agree. What began as a temporary arrangement quickly evolved into a cherished family ritual. These purchases are not inexpensive either. Many of the goods Corey desires are one of a kind or custom-made, which frequently requires a significant investment. For a long time, I didn't think about the cost of all this pink stuff. I thought my parents could afford it. I never questioned how they could afford to continue this habit week after week, year after year. But soon, I discovered something I could not have anticipated. My parents had not been managing their expenses through regular budgeting or savings. They have been committing fraud to cover the rising prices. You see, when I was born, my grandparents established a trust fund for both me and Corey, with equal sums given to us. Corey, who has Down syndrome, was supposed to use the money for her therapies or whatever else she needed, but I was supposed to use mine for college or a down payment on a home. Only my parents had access to these funds, but my grandparents trusted them to handle them carefully. They also made certain that Corey and I were aware of these trust funds from a young age, allowing us to rely on them for financial support. It was a thoughtful present from my grandparents, and I always felt secure knowing that the trust fund would be available when the time came. When Corey reached 18, she received a portion of the trust monies. Since she still lives with and relies on my parents, they have been in charge of managing her money. They've utilized her trust fund over the years to assist pay for her treatments and therapies, which have become more demanding as she's gotten older. The money has helped with everything, from her medical treatment to providing the materials she requires for daily life. I recognized that the money was intended to meet her needs, and I never questioned how it was being spent. When I turned 18, I anticipated to get my half of the trust fund, as promised. I had previously planned to utilize the money for my college tuition. Once that was taken care of, I intended to preserve the remainder for any additional bills that would arise as I approached maturity. I had my future planned out, and I was counting on that fund to help me forge a steady route forward. But little did I know, my hopes would soon be dashed. My grandparents arranged a fantastic 18th birthday party for me last week. They had done the same for Corey when she turned 18, so I had been looking forward to my own celebration for quite some time. They had invited everyone in their family. I was genuinely pleased, surrounded by the people I cared about, and it was one of those days when everything felt just right. Following the cake cutting, my grandparents made an announcement to the entire gathering. They told me how proud they were to see me all grown up and gone to college, and that as a birthday present this year, I would receive the trust fund they had put up for me years before. The entire room erupted in cheers and clapping, with everyone praising me on this incredible gift. I felt a rush of exhilaration and thankfulness come over me as I hugged and thanked my grandparents for everything. But in the midst of all the enthusiasm, I saw that my parents were the only ones who did not appear joyful. While everyone else smiled and congratulated me, my parents seemed unconcerned. They stood off to the side, their faces strained, almost uncomfortable. I could see them exchanging glances, and while they didn't say anything, there was a discomfort to them that was difficult to miss. It struck me as peculiar, but in the excitement of the celebration, I didn't give it much thought. I wanted to enjoy the rest of the party, so I put it to the back of my mind. Later that evening, When we got home from the party, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. My parents appeared uptight and didn't speak much with me. Typically, they were concerned about Corey's health, mood, or anything she needed. But that night, Corey appeared absolutely satisfied, playing with one of her new gifts. Sensing something else was going on, I finally asked my folks if there was anything wrong. That's when my father gave me a serious look and informed me that he and my mother needed to talk to me alone. The tone of his voice immediately sent shivers down my spine. I could see it was serious. We sat together in the living room, and they exchanged troubled looks before my father began to talk. He explained, almost tentatively, that they wouldn't be able to give me my trust fund as my grandparents had planned. I didn't understand what he meant at first, so I asked him to clarify. My father continued, his voice full of shame and despair. He revealed that throughout the years, they had spent all of Corey's trust fund on her. When there was nothing left, they began to utilize the money from my trust fund, which they had access to. With a big sigh, he revealed that 90% of my trust fund was already gone, leaving little for me. I was taken aback as I considered what he had just stated. The money set aside for my future, for my education, was gone. He went on to say that the majority of money had been spent on my sister's shopping habit and the various treatments she required. As his words sank in, a numbness crept over me. My thoughts raced, attempting to figure out how this happened without my knowledge. They had raided my trust fund without informing me, to cover Corey's bills and habits. I questioned why they would do something like this to me. My parents began to justify themselves, their words laced with defensiveness. They informed me that caring for Corey had cost them a lot of money, but they had no choice but to do it. Her needs have always come first. My father discussed the never-ending expenses, the therapies, treatments, and, of course, the innumerable gifts she required every week to stay calm. I contended that they could have ceased buying her all of those items when they learned they were financially taxing. They did, however, highlight that for Corey, these goods were more than just luxuries. They were things that helped her manage and made her world a bit simpler to understand. And for them, every penny spent had been worthwhile. They couldn't simply refuse her. At that point, I felt a rush of rage fill up inside me. I questioned how they could justify spending nearly everything I had saved for my future without even speaking with me. Didn't I matter to them? My father tried to calm me down, stating that I needed to comprehend what they had been through. He discussed the stress they'd felt, the sacrifices they'd had to make as Corey's caregivers, and how difficult it was to satisfy her requirements week after week. My mother nodded, noting that Corey's condition necessitated continual care. And sometimes that meant spending money in ways that were unfair to me but were important for Corey. Both of them felt that because I didn't have any of Corey's ailments, I had an advantage over her, therefore I shouldn't be so greedy with the money. I felt a tear of frustration run down my cheek as I assured them that I wasn't doubting Corey's needs or their decision to prioritize her care. I loved her too. But this was about the lack of honesty, how they had gone behind my back and exploited what was meant to be my future without believing I deserved to know. I informed them that this trust money had been my only source of security, the one thing I felt I could rely on to start my life on my own, and it was now almost completely gone. Instead of addressing how upset and betrayed I felt, they began gaslighting me, turning the subject around on me. They expressed disappointment that I couldn't be more understanding, and that as Corey's sister, I should appreciate that sometimes sacrifices were necessary. They said, "We are all in this together." I was astounded that they wanted me to simply accept it all as a fool. To realize that Corey's needs had to come first, no questions asked. I questioned them why it was always Corey and not me. Did they not want me to do anything in my life? That's when my parents revealed a plan they had for my future, which revolved solely around taking on the task of caring for Corey. They explained that they never cared about my education because it isn't that important. They expected me to step up and help them with Corey's financial and emotional needs. My mother looked at me with a mix of pleading and resignation, saying, "You know, we're getting older, and it's exhausting looking after Corey. We won't be able to do this forever, so we need you to step in." She went on to say that they didn't mind if I went to a local college rather than the college of my choice. She only hoped I'd get a steady job as soon as I graduated so I could bring Corey to live with me. Then she said we could finally rest. Dad advised that I start contributing financially sooner, while still in college, by working a part-time job and sending money home to Corey. It would help Corey have some independence in her life, he told me, by letting her buy whatever it is that she wants and allowing her to maintain the lifestyle we've provided for her. I sat there, stunned, trying to figure out what my folks expected me to do. At that point, I felt completely misled and frustrated. This was not the future I envisioned for myself. It seemed as if my parents expected me to abandon my own aspirations and plans in order to easily transition into their role as Corey's caregiver, without ever asking what I desired for my own life. Finally, I roared at them, my voice quivering with years of accumulated rage and hurt. Have you ever thought about what I want? Or am I just here to live for Corey? You never even thought to ask me what I wanted, did you? All these years, I've been expected to just give, and now you're pushing me to be Corey's caretaker so you can rest. How is any of this fair? My voice trembled as the rage spilled out. You're making decisions for me without even considering what it means for my life. I can't just drop everything for Corey and pretend like my dreams don't matter. All of my bottled up anger spilled out, years of feeling forgotten, years of being told I needed to prioritize Corey, and years of watching them pander to her every whim while I was expected to quietly support from the sidelines. My folks constantly attempt to persuade me that I shouldn't be so selfish and inconsiderate. It was as if they wanted me to conform and embrace a life I had never planned for simply because they believed it was better for Corey. So, since last week, I've been completely ignoring my parents. All I feel for them is contempt. Am I the a-hole for reporting my parents for taking my trust fund and spending it on my sister? Update 1. Wow, this post has gone viral in just a few hours. Thank you for all your advice. I am currently on my way to tell my grandparents everything. Since the trust fund was created with their money, I believe it is critical that I have their support while I confront this matter. After I've explained everything to them, I plan to let my grandparents decide what we should do next. I trust their judgment and know they will have my best interests at heart as we find out how to tackle this together. I had kept my voice shut all this time because I truly believed my folks would finally come around. However, it is evident that they have not. Update 2. It has been 2 weeks since my last update, so I told my grandparents everything. They were as astonished as I was to learn that my parents had utilized my trust fund without my authorization. That same week, my grandparents came to question my parents about what had happened to my trust fund. My grandparents had worked hard to establish the fund for both me and Corey. They were deeply committed to ensuring that we have the financial resources we require for our futures. They were understandably upset when they discovered that my parents had illegally drained the money behind their backs. My parents answered by telling them the same sob story they had shared with me. They recounted, once again, how they had been obliged to spend the money on Corey's care and therapy. They urged my grandparents to explain why they did what they did, as if their rationale would somehow make it all right. But my grandfather would have none of it. He roared at them, his voice filled with fury and amazement. He told them unequivocally that they were accountable for repaying the whole trust fund, regardless of the circumstances or justifications for its use. He was visibly angry and felt betrayed by my parents' conduct. For a moment, I hoped they'd finally accept responsibility and set things right. Then, frightened, my mother came to my grandparents and began pleading with them. She indicated that caring for Corey was difficult, and that her needs were numerous and frequent. She stated that Corey's trust money was insufficient to support the increasing costs of her treatments and ongoing bills. She rationalized taking my trust fund by claiming it helped them care for Corey. And then, in an almost horrible twist of fate, my parents turned against me. They reprimanded me for telling my grandparents everything. They were upset that I had revealed their activities and forced them to face the repercussions. My dad, in particular, was furious. He told me, with a strong edge in his voice, that I should consider myself fortunate since I was born normal, unlike Corey, and that I shouldn't despise her sister so much. It was as if my entire life, my challenges and needs, didn't matter. Everything revolved around Corey. And now I was being punished for not fitting in with the role they had chosen for me. Without thinking, I looked them in the eye and told them straight out that if they didn't give me back the money I owed, I would sue them and make sure they went to jail for their actions. I reminded them that what they did was illegal, and there was no way they could justify it in court. They couldn't prove otherwise that the trust fund was intended for me and only me. My tone was calm, but my comments were plain and firm. I could see the color drain from my parents' faces as they comprehend what I had just spoken. For the first time, I genuinely stood up for myself, and I could see the shock in their faces. They were not used to me being that straightforward. So resolute. Fortunately, my grandparents nodded in accord. They supported me because they knew I was correct. Seeing their encouragement, I persisted, speaking with greater conviction. I told my parents that it didn't matter how much they spent on Corey or what they did for her. Corey was their child, and it wasn't my obligation to give up my future for her. I loved Corey, of course, and I would always be there for her, but I wasn't going to sacrifice my own life, education, and goals just to make her feel cared for. I made it plain that I was tired of always coming second to her, of being overlooked while her needs were always prioritized. I finished by declaring I was done with them. I had had enough of being treated like the invisible child, who was expected to meekly accept whatever scraps were left for her. For the first time in my life, I stood up for myself, and I knew I could never take it back. My parents had pushed me to my limit, and I was not going to allow them to continue to dictate my life. My father instantly disagreed, his voice full of shock and anger, insisting that I couldn't threaten them with jail. He told me that as their child, I should have family loyalty and be willing to support them at all times, especially after everything they had done for me over the years. His statements were intended to make me feel guilty and to remind me of my responsibilities to them. My mother, attempting to ease the situation, even weighed in, proposing that since there was still 10% of my trust fund remaining, I could simply accept it and keep my mouth shut. It felt like they were treating me like a charity case, as if the residual crumbs from my trust fund were all I deserved and I should forget about anything else. But my granddad refused to back down. He came in, his voice stern, and informed my parents that if they didn't agree to give me back the full amount, he would get the best lawyer in town to sue them. The possibility of legal action appeared to have had a significant impact on my parents. They eventually became silent, recognizing my grandfather meant business. After a tense exchange, they reluctantly admitted that what they had done was incorrect. Nonetheless, they begged my grandparents for some time to consider things over. However, the ramifications didn't stop there. My father was furious with me for exposing them to my grandparents and threatening him and mom with jail time. In his rage, he declared that he never wanted to see my face again. He urged me to leave his house, stating he had had enough of supporting a selfish person like me, someone who could backstab their own family, like this. When my grandparents heard this, they quickly offered to have me move in with them. They assured me that I always had a home with them and that they would help me in every way they could as I worked out my next steps. So, without hesitation, I packed my clothing, gathered my necessary documents, and moved out of my parents' house. Currently, I live with my grandparents. I hate that my parents have just kicked me out, but I'm also relieved to be away from them. I miss Corey a lot. I'm aware that what I did has permanently damaged my relationship with my family. However, I do not regret standing up for myself. Update 3. It's been a month since I last updated. After much pressure and legal threats from my grandfather, my parents finally signed an agreement drawn out by my grandfather's lawyer. The terms were easy. Because they could not repay the entire cash they had taken from me in one lump sum, they would make installments over the next 18 months. This would give them time to pay off the loan gradually, without putting a hardship on their finances all at once. However, the agreement had a vital stipulation. If they failed to make any payment by the agreed-upon date, or if they did not follow through at all, my grandparents and I had the right to initiate urgent legal action. This clause served as a safeguard, ensuring that they couldn't avoid paying me back. My folks are still unhappy with me. They blame me for everything that has happened, and it seems like they are unable to let go of their wrath or humiliation. They still don't understand why I took the actions I did and stood up for myself in such a dramatic fashion. Despite their hatred, my grandma has assured me that none of this is my fault. She told me again today that I did what I needed to do to protect myself and my future, and that I should focus on moving forward now rather than looking back. I see Corey from time to time. She misses me, and I miss her also. She frequently inquires about me, and it is evident that she is unaware of the complete picture. But she understands enough to see that something significant occurred between us. She's noticed that I'm not as present as I once was and that my parents did something to injure me. It's horrible not to be able to help her understand how bad our parents are. Regardless, I'll always be there for her. My stepdad abandoned me in the hospital to go on vacation. I called my dad. CPS got involved when my mom tried to make me lie. Kevin, my stepfather, disgusts me. He is one of the most annoying, controlling, and disrespectful guys I've ever met. Since he married my mother, my life has been turned upside down. My parents divorced 3 years ago. Mom and Dad didn't get along and fought frequently. When they announced their divorce, I wasn't surprised. They had never been a wonderful match from the beginning. They tried to make marriage work, but there was constant conflict, particularly over home obligations. Although my mother was legally a stay-at-home parent, she did not love any of the traditional household chores that come with that role. Cooking, cleaning, and even assisting me with my homework were never her top priorities, and she made no secret of her hatred for those activities. Instead, she spent the most of her time glued to her phone, attempting to grow an online following. She fancied herself a beauty influencer, often recording or publishing something, despite her modest following count. When she wasn't on her phone, she spent a lot of her time, and a good chunk of my father's money, on shopping trips, brunches, and beauty treatments. These were her regular activities. She never really fit the stereotype of a typical mother. While most parents check their children's schoolwork and ensure that they are keeping up in school, my mother's primary focus was always herself. She was preoccupied with her looks and wanted me to always be skinny and put together, as if I were a reflection of her image rather than an individual with my own needs. Following the divorce, both of my parents were granted shared custody, and my time was divided between them. It took me some time to adjust to living in two different families, and just as I was becoming settled, my mother met Kevin. She was smitten from their first date. They began dating officially within days, and after only a few weeks, my mother forced me to meet with him. Suddenly, this complete stranger was everywhere, and I was expected to warmly welcome him into our lives. Now, if Kevin were a great person, I wouldn't have had any problems embracing him, but he isn't. Kevin had excessive expectations from the beginning. He expected I would gladly embrace him as my new father, despite the fact that he was a complete downgrade from my biological father. He continually meddles in my life and appears to take every opportunity to mock me. Regardless of what I do, he finds a way to criticize or control me. For example, he has 2 sons, and he becomes visibly irritated anytime he believes I'm acting too girly, as he likes to put it. He has explicitly stated that I should not wear dresses or tight skirts, as if how I dress is any of his business. He also insists that I never let my hair down and that I always wear my long hair in a bun. It does not stop there. When I have friends around, he always interrupts us, claiming he's just checking in. But it's not just a brief hello or a casual query. He barges in and hovers around, as if he doesn't trust me and my friends to be alone. It's really obtrusive and, frankly, humiliating. When I complain or urge him to leave us alone, he dismisses it, stating things like, "Girls require constant supervision," and that we should just pretend he isn't even around. It's irritating that he doesn't interfere as much with his sons or feel the need to constantly monitor their movements. When I've tried to express how much this worries me to my mother, hoping for support or at least some understanding, she just dismisses it. She claims he's just being protective, as if it excuses his actions. On top of everything, Kevin's 2 sons make my life even more difficult. They have no idea of personal space, and their personalities contradict mine in every aspect. They are also relentless when it comes to bullying me. They continuously tease, mock, and find new ways to make me feel small. And instead of intervening, my mother dismisses their behavior, stating, "That's how all siblings bond." When my mother decided to marry Kevin after only a year of dating, she expected me to simply fall in line. She made it clear that she loved Kevin and was determined to make their marriage work. She knew I had reservations and frustrations, but she was clear about what she expected from me. To give Kevin a chance without making things difficult for her. She begged me to welcome him as a member of our family. It seemed like a lot to ask, especially considering how quickly everything was occurring. But I wanted to assist her while keeping the peace, so I agreed to try. Since then, I have made a genuine attempt to accept Kevin and his sons. I've tried to follow his routines and adapt to the changes, though it hasn't been easy. One of the things that upsets me the most is Kevin's insistence that I refer to him as Dad. It doesn't feel right, and every time I say it, I can't help but feel animosity rise within me. I already have a father, and I do not want to replace him. However, Kevin does not seem to realize or care that it is difficult for me. Beyond the name, what is truly upsetting is my mother's shift in focus and goals. After her marriage, she seemed to be more concerned with Kevin's sons than with me. She spends more time with them, assists them in ways she never did for me, and treats them more like a mother than she ever did for me. I sometimes feel as though I've lost my place in her life. She is simply a mother to Kevin's sons now. I'd want to live with my father, especially because he's normally more understanding. However, he had to relocate for a new job in another city, which paid him substantially more. He pays me occasional visits, but I live with my mother full-time. Dad and I also communicate on the phone frequently. He is aware of some of my concerns with Kevin and his son since I have discussed them with him. He's really supportive and has even attempted to talk to my mother about the matter. I believe he sincerely wants to assist, but whenever he brings it up, my mother shuts him off. She tells him to back off and says he shouldn't meddle with her marriage. Despite everything, I've worked hard over the years to acclimate to life with my new family. I've really tried to make an effort with Kevin and his sons, believing that if I remained patient and transparent, we could develop a nice relationship. Despite my best attempts, I continue to feel invisible within my own family. This year, Kevin was suddenly promoted at work. When he got home, he excitedly declared that he'd be taking us all on a family trip. We were all excited by the news, especially since we hadn't been on a vacation together in a long time. He and Mom chose the location and reserved tickets and lodgings for all of us. Unfortunately, just a day before our trip, I was involved in a car accident with my mother. We were heading home from shopping for some clothing for our impending vacation when another automobile smashed into us from behind. It wasn't a major collision, but it was enough to throw us off course and cause some injuries. My mother was generally fine, with a few scrapes and bruises here and there, but I wasn't that fortunate. The accident caused me to break my arm and suffer a concussion. The ambulance arrived, and I was quickly brought to the hospital. When Kevin initially learned of our accident, he rushed to the hospital, appearing concerned. At first, I assumed he was really concerned for my and my mother's well-being, and that he had come to see us. But then he kept bringing up the trip, agonizing about whether we'd still be able to travel and worried that the money he'd invested would be wasted. The physicians eventually advised us that, due to my concussion, I would need to spend a few days in the hospital for observation. They wanted to make sure I was okay before allowing me to return home, but travel was obviously out of the question for me. Kevin glanced at me, irritated, as if I was to blame for getting into the accident and wasting his money. My mother half-heartedly offered to remain with me while I was in the hospital. It gave me hope that she would choose to help me during such a tough moment. Kevin, on the other hand, was quick to respond, stating that because our plane tickets had already been purchased, we were already losing money by not going. He argued that my mother should not waste even more money by staying behind. He then turned to me and said that at my age, I should be able to stay in the hospital alone for a few days. He mentioned how safe the hospital was, with physicians and nurses available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, hinting that I had nothing to worry about. Kevin then insisted that once I was discharged, he would arrange for a babysitter to stay with me at home. I argued with Kevin that I didn't want to be alone in the hospital or have a babysitter look after me at home. I urged my mother to stay with me instead. At first, my mother tried to defend me, telling Kevin that it wasn't proper to leave me alone in the hospital. She knew it was wrong. Kevin, however, continued to push back. He insisted that my mother's presence was unneeded and that her staying would mean sitting by my side doing nothing meaningful all day. He made it appear as if her presence was pointless, entirely neglecting the emotional support she could truly offer. Kevin prioritized avoiding spending his vacation money over anything else. It was evident that he didn't consider me to be his biological child, thus he didn't care how I felt or what had happened to me. I pleaded that at 15 years old, I shouldn't be left alone in the hospital. I was terrified and in agony, and the prospect of going through this without any family members around was overwhelming. I proposed a solution, stating that Mom could contact my father to come and stay with me while she and Kevin went on their trip. Sure, it would take him some time to get here because he lived in another city, but I was confident he'd come right away if he realized I was in the hospital. I figured this would allow them to continue their vacation while keeping me company. But Kevin rejected the notion almost immediately. He ignored my concerns, calling me foolish for making such a huge deal about small injuries. He dismissed my notion of calling my father, arguing that it would just make him worry more. Kevin felt there was no need to interrupt anybody else's plans over something as minor as a concussion and a fractured arm, which he believed would mend well with a few days of hospital rest. In the end, Kevin's pressure was effective. I stared at my mother, hoping she would hold her ground and insist on staying with me. But, as usual, she caved to Kevin. Instead of battling for what I needed, she decided to go. She only stayed with me for one night, which provided some consolation. I clung to the hope that, after seeing how vulnerable I was, she would realize I needed her presence. But the next day, Kevin arrived at the hospital to bring her up, anxious to embark on the vacation as planned, without regard for how I was doing. I felt abandoned and deceived when my mother left me alone in the hospital. After only one day alone, I couldn't stop crying. One of the nurses saw me crying. When she realized I didn't have anyone nearby to check on me, she offered to phone my mother. I told her it was all right, that they would probably not respond, but she insisted. So I gave her my father's number instead. I partly expected my father to chastise me or, like Kevin, tell me that I was exaggerating and that being alone in the hospital was no big issue. But when my father answered the phone and the nurse told him about my position, he was immediately alarmed. He sounded more concerned than I had heard Dad in a long time and inquired whether my mother had truly gone on the vacation without me. I described everything, including how Kevin insisted on leaving me behind because he didn't want the trip money to go to waste, and how my mother eventually consented. My father was outraged. As I told him everything, he became silent. But I could sense his rage simmering. He then told me that my mother had just indicated that we had been in a little fender bender, downplaying the entire incident. She hadn't mentioned my fractured arm, concussion, or the fact that she and Kevin had left me alone in the hospital. According to what she told him, there was nothing to worry about, therefore he didn't feel the need to contact me. Hearing that my mother had willfully lied about my circumstances to my father made me feel even more hurt and betrayed. My father instantly told me that he will come over as soon as possible. He said he'd drop everything, drive to the hospital, and remain with me for as long as it took. For the first time since my admission, I felt relieved. Knowing that my father was on his way to be with me and that someone was finally taking my condition seriously. As I sat there waiting, I realized how much I needed this type of support in my life. Within 2 hours, my father arrived at the hospital. Seeing him enter through the door felt like a great weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I started crying as he hugged me and promised me that everything will be fine. He then went straight to my doctors, making sure he grasped every aspect of my injuries. I could see relief on his face as he affirmed that, while my injuries were severe and significant, they were not life-threatening. He genuinely regretted not being there for me sooner and not challenging my mother's version of events. He told me he regretted assuming that everything was good without personally checking in on me, and it was evident he was beating himself up over it. My father was visibly angry at Kevin. He was upset that my stepfather had the audacity to dismiss my demands and then choose to go on a trip rather than ensure my well-being. Kevin's lack of respect and concern by leaving me alone in the hospital demonstrated how little I meant to him. His behavior screamed volumes, indicating that despite being married to my mother, I was nothing more than an annoyance to him. My father tried contacting my mother and Kevin, but neither answered. This infuriated Dad even more, and he vowed that he would give Kevin and Mom a lesson for abandoning me like this. Over the next 2 nights, my father stayed by my side, having taken time from work to ensure that I was not alone. He never left me alone till I was released. Even then, he wasn't keen about me returning to Kevin's place, where I'd be left with only a babysitter until everyone returned. Instead, he insisted I accompany him home, and I consented. Once I arrived at my father's house, he attempted to contact Mom again. She claimed to have missed his previous calls since she was having so much fun with Kevin and his sons. Hearing this inflamed his rage even more, and he did not hold back. He forcefully told her that her actions were unacceptable, that abandoning me in the hospital was a major act of neglect, and that he intended to take legal action to hold her and Kevin responsible. He even mentioned taking her to court if necessary, which implies she could lose custody of me. He made it apparent that he was ready to report her and Kevin for their activities. Since then, my phone has been constantly vibrating with calls and texts from both Kevin and my mother. Instead of accepting their actions or apologizing, they've been sending messages accusing me of ruining their vacation by informing my father about my position. Kevin has even gone so far as to claim that all I had to do was keep my mouth shut and silently remain in the hospital without causing a scene. They said everything would have been okay if I had just complied. I was made to feel bad about throwing my mom and stepdad under the bus. Update 1. For everyone who is asking, now that I've had some time to think about it and spoken with my father, I know how many times Kevin and Mom have neglected me over the years, and I've just let it happen. I remained silent, thinking things would change, but they never did. It's difficult to accept, yet I let myself be pushed aside for their convenience. Now, thinking back, I can't believe I put up with it for so long. For example, Kevin frequently strained my relationship with my father. He would continually make disparaging comments about him, calling him a deadbeat or a loser in comparison to him. Kevin believed my father was not a good spouse to my mother, and as a result, he felt he had the right to criticize him whenever he wanted. Mom never asked him to stop. When I experienced problems at home or tried to talk to my mother about them, Kevin always rejected my concerns. He would tell me that I was exaggerating things or that I was overly sensitive because I was a girl. He often said that this was why he was so fortunate to have only boys. Kevin consistently demonstrated preference for his sons, even in minor everyday exchanges. He was always willing to help them with their bills. But if I asked my mother for anything, Kevin would probe me with endless questions. He often accused me of buying useless items and wasting money, even though it wasn't his money. It was my father's money, therefore I should have had the freedom to spend it any way I chose. Despite living in the same house, we never had quality time together as a family. Kevin and Mom would frequently make plans with his sons and exclude me, claiming they didn't want to bother me or wanted to spend quality time together without me. This often made me feel abandoned and unimportant. They'd go out to dinner or do activities they enjoyed without thinking about whether I'd want to join. This is perhaps why I was so delighted to accompany them on their vacation. They rarely engage me in their plans. Kevin and Mom also do not like to celebrate my birthdays. They usually tell me that since Kevin's sons don't make a big fuss about their birthdays, I shouldn't expect much either. It's as if they assume I don't deserve particular attention simply because it's not their style. When it comes to gifts, I constantly wind up with stuff I don't like or utilize, as if they didn't think about what I genuinely appreciate. Whenever I was failing in school, Kevin would say stuff like, "You're just lazy, that's your problem. And why do you even bother with that stuff?" Instead of asking what was wrong or providing assistance, he complained about how it inconvenienced him. Mom, on the other hand, would remain mute, offering no words of comfort or support despite knowing how badly it affected me. Update 2. So, my father did report Mom and Kevin to CPS. He didn't make this decision lightly, but he felt it was vital to ensure that what had occurred was not forgotten. He couldn't just sit back and let them treat me that way, abandoning me in the hospital with no second thought. When Kevin and my mother came home, they were called by CPS. They had to answer numerous questions about the situation, their behavior, and their decision to leave me. I'm sure it was a wake-up call for them, one they probably didn't expect. But the authorities agreed with my father. Leaving me behind in the hospital, especially after being injured, was unacceptable. They admitted that I had been ignored in a way that jeopardized my well-being. Later, my mother called me. She wasn't happy, and her tone indicated that she was furious with me. She told me that by involving CPS, I had gotten both her and Kevin in a lot of trouble. She seemed to be blaming me for what had happened, although I knew I had done nothing wrong. She cautioned me that CPS would be contacting me next to hear my side of the story. My mother then forcefully pressured me to lie to the authorities, warning me that if I didn't, I'd be taken away from her and she'd lose custody. I disagreed with her, telling her that I wasn't comfortable lying to the authorities and that she should have considered the repercussions of her actions before abandoning me at the hospital that day. Mom then tried to guilt-trip me, telling me that she had given me years of her life and that I needed to prove my loyalty to her this time. She made it sound like I was betraying her by being open with the authorities, as if I was to blame for everything that transpired. But what really struck me was her statement that lying would protect Kevin and his sons. She emphasized how the CPS investigation could generate complications for Kevin, particularly with his ex-wife. She warned that Kevin's ex might find out and use this as leverage to make Kevin pay for it. I just shook my head, realizing that my mother was more worried with Kevin's reputation and her own than with what I had gone through. She never inquired about my health or recovery. Meanwhile, she begged me to lie and protect her family. I couldn't stand her selfishness any longer. I kept my position and told her unequivocally that I didn't care how this affected her or Kevin. I would not lie to the authorities. I informed her that I would tell them everything that happened and that I would not be covering up anything for anyone. If this meant she and Kevin were in trouble, then so be it. They were the adults here. They were the ones who made mistakes, so I was not going to shield them from the consequences of their actions. My mother raged at me, calling me names, but I refused to give in. Update 3. It has been about 2 weeks since my previous update. I spoke to the authorities and told them the truth. For the time being, I plan to stay with my father. My father has been looking at schools so I can live with him permanently. I must admit that living with him feels good. Mom has continued to try to guilt-trip me, but there is nothing further she can do at this time. She has received a warning from CPS. Mom had clearly abandoned her obligation to me, and this could not be overlooked. CPS has urged my mother to make significant adjustments, including required parenting classes and counseling, to address her neglect issues and her connection with me. Kevin was also questioned since he had demonstrated a lack of respect and concern for me, particularly following the hospital episode. CPS made it plain that they would closely watch the issue if and when I came over to stay with them. They warned that any more negligence or cruelty would result in more severe punishment. 4 months later, I can't believe it's been nearly 4 months since I lived with Dad. I feel like I'm finally in a place where I don't have to walk on eggshells or question my worth. Living with Dad has been a tremendous relief. He is encouraging, listens to me, and, most importantly, respects my space and decisions. It's been a full 180 degrees from what I was dealing with previously. I feel heard here. I can tell him about my day, my troubles, my dreams, and he actually cares. I've been able to devote more time to my studies and mental health, and I believe I'm finally returning to my true self. I've also made some wonderful new friends at school, and I truly like spending time with them. In fact, last month, for the first time in a long time, I was able to celebrate my birthday properly. I invited all of my friends over, and we ate pizza while watching corny romantic movies. It was the kind of birthday I'd always wanted but never got while living with my mother and Kevin. Mom's situation remains complex. She's been attempting to contact me more regularly recently, even texting me about how sorry she is and how much she misses me. Part of me feels bad for staying away, but then I recall everything that led me to this point. I made it apparent to her that I am still not ready to return. And, while she attempts to reach out, I have set boundaries for myself. Her acts were detrimental, and she must accept full responsibility for them. As for Kevin, he has neither apologized or taken responsibility for his conduct. Honestly, I am not surprised. He has never demonstrated genuine concern for me or my well-being. I will never forget how he treated me, especially in the hospital. I don't care whether he ever changes. I'm not waiting to find out. I've learned to rely on myself and those that genuinely care for me. And that's it. My mother and sister crashed my wedding, insisting I give up my fiancé because they believed he was perfect for my sister, not me. Hello, everyone, I'm 25, female, and I'm furious. I'm very confident this will be my last conversation with my family, and I was wondering if you would do the same if you were in my situation. The main characters in this narrative include, I am 25 years old and female. My sister Ellie, 23, female. My mother, 47, female. Growing up, my mother was considerably closer to Ellie than to me. I think it was because I was far more manly than either of them. I had diverse interests and goals. I'd been playing soccer since middle school, and as I got older, I became interested in other sports such as volleyball and swimming. I eventually won a soccer scholarship, allowing me to attend a university 4 states away. While I was away at university, Ellie decided she did not want anything to do with further education. She dropped out of high school and was proud of it. She had been more concerned with romantic affairs than academics since her early high school years. Somewhere along the way, my mother encouraged her to keep doing this. In my mother's opinion, the finest thing a girl can do is have multiple men fawning over her, because life is easier with admirers than when you settle down with just one person. My parents split up due to my mother's strong beliefs about what a guy should be and how he should behave. My father was emotionally mature and available, which she found overwhelming. When they parted, I was the only one who remained in contact with my father. Ellie, on the other hand, believed all Mom had told her. She concluded Dad was a sissy and that she'd be better off without him around. She stated he wasn't much of a father to us anyway. I cannot say I agree with her. I tried to sway her mind about our father, but she had no desire in that relationship. In her opinion, he had dug his grave by deciding to burden Mom with his emotional needs. Her weird beliefs about masculinity and the male mindset troubled me. Deep down, I suspected she was developing a corrosive, nearly man-hating worldview as she grew older. While Ellie was bouncing from one romantic connection to the next, I was working on my undergraduate degree. I had a lot on my plate, balancing my studies and my sports scholarship, so I simply didn't have time to date. That fact concerned Ellie and Mom tremendously. In their perspective, what do I value if I can't marry someone wealthy? It was weird hearing them utter those things. My mother even went so far as to give me bad dating advice, including manipulative tactics. How I should target men's weak points, console them, and then use it as power to dominate them. She claimed that I needed to control someone in order for them to stay with me, select me, or like me. Her statements seemed so weird to me. Her advice was very strange. I thanked her for her advice, but never followed it. When I was 22, I met someone through my master's program. We began dating, and when I was 24, we became engaged. Because of my mother's weird beliefs about what a woman must do to keep a man, I believed it would be best to conceal my boyfriend's presence until we were engaged. My father, however, was completely aware of my relationship. He had met my fiancée several times before our engagement. After alerting my father of our engagement, I felt it was time to present my fiancée to my mother. So I did. The meeting did not proceed as anticipated. When I initially brought him home, my mother was overjoyed, but not because he was my fiancé. Oh no. Mom did not even allow me to finish introducing him. I had hardly mentioned his name when she interrupted and stated that I had finally come around as a sister, because he was the ideal man for Ellie. She said I should have told her and Ellie about him sooner. I was too astonished to speak. So was my fiancé. We both sat there, watching Ellie parade around in tight clothing, not even attempting to conceal the fact that I was right there. This was incredibly unacceptable behavior, even if my fiancé was not my fiancé and was simply a buddy. After 5 minutes of watching this drama develop, I snapped out of my amazement and resolved to correct the record. I introduced him as my fiancé and showed them my ring. And for once, I'd appreciate it if you cared about my happiness rather than Ellie's. Hearing this, my mother finally took a good look at my fiancé's face. After glancing at him for a few moments, she announced that she could not offer her blessing to this marriage. I couldn't believe what I heard. I was shocked. I got hurt. I was experiencing too many emotions at once. Instead of disputing, I accepted her opinion, grabbed my fiancé's hand, and left the house. Later, my fiancé asked if I still wanted to marry him, knowing how important my mother's comments were to me. I said, "I love you. I see a future with you." And if I want to marry, it will be with you and no one else. With that, we continued with our wedding planning. After nearly 2 months of planning, my wedding day finally arrived. I was in my wedding gown, feeling on top of the world. Everything was perfect. My father came to escort me down the aisle, but then, a disturbance. My mother and Ellie barged in, disregarding the security. Ellie was wearing a wedding gown that had belonged to my mother. My mother called out to me, asking that I cancel the wedding. She said, "You should not marry your fiancé." And why? Because Ellie deserves it more than I do. My mother believed Ellie deserved a good-paying husband who could care for her while she pursued her dream of becoming a homemaker. Unlike me. Unlike the masculine woman that I am. My mother suggested that the outfit would look better on Ellie because she has developed biceps and triceps, and the only thing preventing her from being a male is a lack of facial hair. Mom asked my fiancé, "What type of woman do you want in your arms? A lady who is obedient or a woman who would rather spend her leisure time chasing a ball?" It wounded, embarrassed, and humiliated me to hear such comments from my own mother. I could not even defend myself. My mother viewed my silence as a show of submission and ordered me to step down from the altar, allowing Ellie to take my place. That's when my fiancé stretched out and took my hand. He turned to my mother and urged her to go, as she and Ellie were not welcome here. He stated he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me, a lady he could play soccer with, rather than Ellie, whom he didn't know and didn't like. Mom's face fell. She turned to me and asked me to say something. All I could say was, "Leave." My mother walked out of the event with a nasty smile on her face, barely covering her disdain for me. Ellie trailed behind her, clearly unhappy. I could barely concentrate on the ceremony after that. The wedding was postponed for half an hour while I attempted to settle myself. Once I felt better, I was finally able to marry the love of my life. When I was alone after the wedding, I burst into tears. I don't understand why my mother did what she did. Is it improper for me to want to marry despite being a manly person? I do not comprehend. Update 1. Hello, everyone. Thank you for all your kind sentiments in my DMs and comments. I haven't had time to respond to everyone, but I assure you that I have read them all, and I thank you all for taking the time to read my tale. Yes, my mother and I were never close due to my passion in athletics. Ellie and Mom look a lot more alike than I do. I resemble my father. After my parents parted, Mom attempted to poison us against Dad. She succeeded with Ellie but not with me. Mom also saw Dad was present during the ceremony, which I don't think she was pleased about. I've received a few texts from my mother, but I haven't had the confidence to open them. Update 2, I opened the messages. My mother laments the fact that I married someone who should have been perfect for Ellie. In her perspective, I ruined Ellie's chance to live the dream life she had always desired by marrying him. I'm not sure why she just cares about Ellie's happiness, not mine. When I challenged my mother about this, she responded, "I did not raise you to be such a hateful person who enjoys being envious of others." I couldn't make much sense of what she said, but I knew it was meant to harm me. I had no reason to sit and suffer what she was spewing at me, so I chose to block her. I've never considered taking such dramatic measures. However, standing where I am today, I believe that is the best course of action. I have temporarily blocked my mother. Update 3. Since I blocked my mother, Ellie has decided to trash me on the internet. She made multiple posts portraying me as the villain who took her lover, which was not the case. Fortunately, my father and his side of the family were aware of my continuous relationship with my husband, so they did not accept her words. My mother's side of the family was a very different story, but that's okay. I am not too concerned about it. I've blocked her as well, and I have no plans to unblock her. Mom's family contacted me, and I described the issue to several of them. Those who believed me were unblocked, while those who did not believe me were blocked. I have no regrets, and that is it. I want to have a good life with my husband, and I'm not going to allow my toxic family spoil it. Wow, your mother has some very antiquated and harmful values. You deserve so much more. I can't comprehend why she thought it was right to do what she did. You are NTA for blocking her, by the way. NTA. You should block your mother, Ellie, and anyone else who believes what they did is acceptable, because it is not at all. Am I the asshole for getting a co-worker fired after she repeatedly mocked me for my breast implants, unaware that I got them due to cancerous cells? Original post. I'm 28 and when I was 24 Mom died of breast cancer, after both of my nanas also died of it. I got some tests done and found that I did have some potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue, and the doctor said I could either wait and see if they did turn harmful or I could get ahead of it and get a double mastectomy. I got a double mastectomy. I was warned about scarring but not the extent of it, and wound up with scars an inch long and half an inch wide on my chest, and I hated the way it looked. It got to the stage where it was having a serious impact on my mental health. I felt sick seeing myself, and I wouldn't leave my flat. I went to a therapist, who did some CBT with me before she suggested seeing a plastic surgeon about scar reduction. The plastic surgeon said the scars could be hidden with implants. I was naturally big, an F-cup, before the mastectomy, so I opted to go with slightly smaller but still fairly large DD-sized implants. They hid the scars pretty well and I'm happy with them. My mental health improved and I felt comfortable in my own skin again. A few months ago I was at work having lunch with this friend of mine and we were planning a holiday. She made a joke about my boobs exploding on the plane. The friend knew me before the surgery and I knew she wasn't being mean, so I laughed. A coworker, Jill, overheard and, not knowing about the cancer thing, told everyone that I'd had a boob job. She hated me from then on out, and she made a bunch of jokes to other coworkers, calling me fake in 2 ways, and more plastic than Barbie, all when I was in earshot. I've asked her to stop more than once. We were all having lunch today. Me, Jill, and a few others. And a coworker, Bob, was talking about his daughter wanting to marry this guy who has nothing going for him. And I said that Bob was being a little shallow. Jill replied, "Well, you'd know all about being shallow," gesturing at my chest. I'd had enough and said, "Do you know why I have these? A few years ago the doctors found potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I was advised to get a double mastectomy by a doctor and was left with huge ugly scars on my chest. I went to see a therapist and cosmetic surgeon, who advised me to get implants to hide the scars, and I did just so I could look at myself in the mirror without crying. So maybe next time you want to judge someone for having cosmetic surgery, you should ask them why they had it first." And feeling like that was a mic drop moment, I picked up my food and left. Someone from the lunchroom came to talk to me, saying Jill was just joking. I was being oversensitive and a bitch about it when Jill didn't know about the cancerous cells. I replied that maybe Jill shouldn't have been a bitch to begin with. It's the end of the day now and half the office seems to side with Jill and the other half with me. Relevant comments. Comment 1. NTA: Jill shouldn't be commenting on her coworkers' bodies. This could easily be seen as sexual harassment. Edit. OP, please mention to HR that you repeatedly asked Jill to stop commenting on your body and she refused. I don't see this ending well for Jill since she continuously commented on your body and pushed you to the point of feeling uncomfortable in the workplace. OP, I don't have any record of it. I only ever spoke to her about stopping in private. The 4 times I asked were in the lift, twice, the stairwell and the women's bathroom, all places without cameras, so the only person who can confirm I asked her is Jill herself. I can prove she's been making comments about my body by asking any coworker she spoke to, but can't prove I asked her to stop. Edit. HR want to see me about creating a hostile work environment, so looks like someone reported either me or Jill or both. Update. HR wants to see me tomorrow, so I'll update after work. If they're dealing with it quickly, though, it can't be good. Update 2. Some coworkers have offered to write me letters of support for HR tomorrow, basically saying that they've seen Jill harass me completely with rough dates and times. Relevant comments. Who filed the HR complaint? Oop. Wouldn't be surprised if it turned out Jill was the one who reported me. She has a friend in HR. Would it count as sexual harassment? Commenter. She has a friend in HR. If the note is from that friend, or the meeting is with that friend, I would try to go over her head as fast as possible. Perhaps initiating a counterclaim, not sure if that is the right term. You may want to ask over at /r/legal advice or r/legal advice UK if you are in the UK as someone else guessed. OOP? I am in the UK. The email is from Jill's friend, so it looks like the friend will be overseeing the complaint, but there's something in my contract that basically says if HR ever gets involved I have the right to an unbiased overseer and can request a different one if I can prove the current one is biased. So if it is this woman and I can show she and Jill are friends, then I might be able to fix it or go above her head. Editor's note. Edited out a rehash of the AITA post. For the rest of the day I had about 1/3 of my office come up to me and offer support, and the rest tell me that Jill was just joking around and I was being a bitch. I replied that Jill was being a bitch long before I was. I then got an email from HR saying they wanted to talk to me the following day, and when I called for clarification they mentioned a hostile work environment. Note, this is apparently an American term and holds little weight in England, but it's what was said over the phone. I knew the person who signed off the email and I'd spoken to. Her name was Debbie, and she was Jill's friend in HR, so I was fairly confident on who had reported me. I realized that if this was already being sent to HR, I needed as much ammunition as possible, so I went about collecting my information. As Debbie had dealt with me so far, It was safe to assume she would be the person reviewing the complaint with me, and if that was true I was fucked. However, I vaguely remembered a section on complaints that was in my contract when I first signed with the company. I flicked through the contract and there was a part in complaints section that said I was contractually allowed to request a change of reviewer if I felt my allocated reviewer was biased. It was called an impartial overseer. I photocopied the page and highlighted that part. Then I messaged the people who had offered their support over Facebook, and said basically HR have asked to see me. Do any of you remember Jill insulting me to your face, and are you willing to write and sign something saying what you heard and when? Not everyone was willing to help, as Jill is somewhat feared in the office due to her befriending HR and management, but about 20 people were willing to help me. I guessed roughly when I'd asked Jill to stop previously. The 4 asks over the last few months, some timings were easy to guess as they'd happened on my break or when I'd first arrived at work, and I wrote them all down, along with a rough time of when the lunchroom confrontation happened and a list of names of who was there for the lunchroom confrontation. I got to work slightly early the next morning. I went round everyone who had messaged me, and most of them managed to give me a printed and signed letter. Some didn't manage to write one, but NBD. This isn't exact words as there's 16 letters to sum up here, but the gist was, my name is their name. I work with Jill last name and OP. On date at time, approx, I spoke with Jill last name, during which she referred to OP as quoted insult. I felt this was inappropriate as it directly related to OP's appearance, and am willing to go on record further to establish that Jill last name has been discussing OP in the workplace in the same manner for 3 months now, causing me discomfort and creating what I feel is a hostile work environment. Signed their name, I wound up with about 16 letters, all from different people, and one of them was in the lunchroom for my conversation with Jill. Some even had bullet-pointed lists of everything Jill had said to them about me or other people. As it turns out, Jill has issues with a lot of people's appearances. She apparently made comments about one coworker's weight, and something anti-Semitic about a different coworker's nose, all of which were put in these letters. There are about 45 people in the office, so while 16 wasn't a majority, it's still a decent amount. The letters weren't hugely long, most were only a paragraph, but they had all the necessary information. I was asked to come to HR at 10 a.m. I took the letters from coworkers, the photocopy of the page in my contract, and my dates and times in a little folder with me. I got there and Debbie was the one overseeing the interview. She got up from her desk, ready to lead me into another room. I immediately turned to the other HR worker that was currently there and said, "So is my meeting with you then?" Debbie said, "No, you're with me." I replied that this wouldn't sit well with me, as my contract states I have a right to an impartial overseer. And as I said this, I took the contract page out of my folder. Debbie read it. I wouldn't let her take the paper when there was a shredder so close by, and said she could be impartial. I replied that I really didn't mean to be a pain, but I had it on good authority that the person on the other end of this complaint is her friend, and my contract does say I'm allowed an impartial overseer. Debbie stomped off to get supervisor. Supervisor asks how I know she can't be impartial, and I tell him that I have it on good authority that Jill, who was on the other end of this complaint, is a close friend of Debbie. He asked Debbie if this was true, to which she only replied, "I can be impartial." Supervisor took a deep breath, asked the other HR rep to come with him, and the 4 of us all went to review the complaint. I thanked them for being so accommodating. I was worried I'd annoyed them. Debbie took out the complaint and all 3 of them went through it with me. Debbie looked homicidal the whole time the interview was happening, as she had clearly anticipated firing me, or at least recommending me being fired. The interview went something like this. It took over half an hour and they kept asking me the same questions but phrased different ways, so this is a really drastically condensed version. Q. You said outside that you think Jill last name reported you. Why is this? A. Jill has had an issue with me for about 3 months now. Q. Why didn't you come to us when you realized Jill had an issue? A. I had no issue with her. Q. What issue does Jill have with you? A. 4 years ago a specialist identified potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I had surgery to remove my breast tissue, thereby removing the cells and the risk. After the surgery I was left with large scars on my chest. I went to a therapist for low self-esteem and depression. The therapist suggested a plastic surgeon who suggested breast implants to cover my scars. All of this is in my medical history, which you have a copy of in my file and my full permission to review. Jill found out about my breast implants but didn't know about the cancer. Jill had a problem with my breast implants, and decided to communicate this problem to our coworkers. Q. Why do you feel this is true? A. Here's 16 signed statements all from different coworkers, all testifying that Jill told the entire office I'd had breast implants on the day she found out and has since made comments about these implants frequently. They have quotes of what Jill said to them about it and rough dates and times. Q. Rough dates and times? A. No one knew this would be escalated to such an extent, so no one really took notes as and when it happened. Q. What event or events do you think directly led to this complaint of harassment? A. For me, harassment began when Jill told everyone about my breast implants without my consent, but as to the complaint placed against me, it would probably be what happened at about time yesterday in the lunchroom. Jill made a comment about me being shallow while gesturing to my breasts, and I replied by giving her an abridged version of my relevant medical history and ending with a comment about the importance of getting the full story. There are cameras in the lunchroom, so I'm sure you'll be able to find that conversation. I'll admit I could have handled the situation better, but after 3 months I felt I had to put my foot down. Here's a list of names of people who were also present. There were 6 people at the table, including myself and Jill. One of these people is also in those letters, and has written their account of the conversation and signed it. Q. Had you had a conversation with Jill prior to this regarding her comments about you? A. Several, spaced out over the last 3 months. Each time I communicated to her that I felt uncomfortable and upset with these comments she was making and would appreciate it if she were to stop. Q. To your knowledge, was Jill made aware of your former cancer at any point in this time? A. Number. It wasn't mentioned in the conversation with my friend she overheard, and I didn't tell her because frankly it's none of her business, and I did not feel the need to detail my medical history to a coworker in order to avoid further sexual harassment. Supervisor stands up and says, "Well, I think we're done here." He shakes my hand and sends me back to my desk saying that I'd hear from them after they reviewed the evidence, letters, CCTV, medical history and anything they had already, and made a decision on the case. I got back to my desk, pulled up my CV, and prepared to start the job search again. About an hour goes by, then the person who wrote the letter and was there for the lunchroom conversation gets called for a meeting with HR. They come back 10ish minutes later. The other people who were also there for the lunchroom conversation get called one by one, except Jill. All of them are gone for about 10 minutes, then come back, find a coworker, and say that HR wants to see them. Then the people who wrote letters but weren't there yesterday are also called one by one and are each gone for about 10 minutes each, some longer, some shorter. By about 3:30 it looks like everyone who wrote a letter or was there in the lunchroom has been interviewed. Then, finally, Jill gets called in. She's gone for about 30 minutes and comes back fuming. She glares at me while I work, but I ignore her. 4:30ish, Jill gets called into HR again. 5 p.m. rolls around, everyone is either leaving or getting ready to leave, when Jill storms back into the office. She glares at me the whole time she packs up her desk. She then starts telling anyone who will listen that I got her fired before shoving her way onto the lift. An email comes in from HR. My case is closed. TLDR. Coworker harassed me over having implants, which I only got because I had cancerous cells. I called her out, she reported me to HR for calling her out. I got a bunch of people to write statements of all the times she harassed me and she got fired instead. Also, I've been told that isn't what a reverse Uno is, but I can't change it. Eat it. Just want to add that regardless of my reasons for getting implants, I still should not have been harassed over them. It just happened to be relevant here because it made Jill look like a real dick, which is probably why she reported me. My girlfriend dumped me twice, the second time for another guy. Now she regrets it, but I won't take her back. Original post, January 27, 2025, I, 34 million, am struggling with whether I'm in the wrong for refusing to talk to my ex, Sarah, 29F, not her real name. There's a lot of history here, and I'll do my best to explain everything clearly. In mid-2022, I met Sarah at work, and we hit it off immediately. I fell for her quickly, and it didn't take long before we started dating. However, early in our relationship, Sarah broke up with me over something minor. To make matters worse, she made a scene in front of everyone at work. I was devastated but didn't want to leave my job at first. Eventually, I realized I still had feelings for her, and seeing her every day became too painful. That's when I decided to quit and find a new job. We lived close to each other, so we bumped into each other frequently over the next few months. We started talking again, but even though I still had feelings for her, I couldn't bring myself to consider getting back together. What she had done hurt me deeply. After a couple of months, she told me she regretted breaking up with me over something so minor. She admitted that doing it in front of everyone was wrong and that she had been thinking about it ever since. She seemed genuinely remorseful, and I could see she meant it. Feeling that her apology was sincere, I asked if she wanted to give our relationship another try. She agreed, and by early 2023, we were officially back together. 1 year later, things were going great. We talked about marriage and building a future together, which made me feel ready to take the next step. I decided to surprise her with a proposal and started working extra hours to save for a house, so we could marry not long after. I didn't tell her why I was working so much because I wanted it to be a complete surprise. Then, out of nowhere, she asked for a break. I was blindsided, and when I asked why, she refused to explain. Around the same time, I noticed she had been talking non-stop about a new guy at her workplace. But suddenly, she stopped mentioning him altogether, which made me suspicious. Confused and hurt, I reached out to one of my close friends, Emily, not her real name, who, along with her boyfriend, still worked at the same place as Sarah. I vented to Emily about what was going on and asked if she knew anything. She said she didn't because she worked in a different department, but she promised to ask around. A few days later, Emily got back to me. She told me that Sarah had been feeling like I was distant lately, especially with me working extra hours and not going out much. Emily said some of Sarah's colleagues had been encouraging her to take a break, claiming I wasn't treating her well and wasn't as invested in the relationship. On top of that, they were trying to match her up with the new guy at work, saying they'd make a better pair. I told Emily about my plans to propose and buy a house for Sarah and me. That was the reason I'd been working so much. I wanted to surprise her with something big. After about 2 weeks, Sarah called me and asked to meet up. I agreed but told her up front that I needed an explanation for why she wanted a break before we could discuss anything else. She brought up how distant I had seemed, saying it made her feel like I wasn't as invested in the relationship anymore. I told her that if she had just talked to me about it, she would have known there was a reason for my behavior, but now, it didn't matter anymore. Then she mentioned the new guy at her workplace. I said his name before she could, and she looked surprised, asking how I knew. I told her I wasn't an idiot. I'd noticed how she suddenly stopped talking about him after bringing him up all the time. She swore that she had never cheated on me. I replied that looking for someone better at the first sign of trouble could be considered cheating by some. At that point, I told her I didn't want to hear whatever else she had to say. Whether or not she wanted to get back together didn't matter. I was breaking up with her regardless. The breakup deeply hurt me. I couldn't bear staying in the same place, so I asked my company for a transfer and used the money I'd saved for the proposal to start over in a new city. While talking to Emily, the friend I had vented to before, she apologized to me. She admitted that she had slipped up and told Sarah about my plans to propose and buy a house. Emily said Sarah broke down crying after hearing that. I appreciated Emily's honesty, but it didn't change what had happened. By mid-December last year, I returned to my hometown to spend Christmas and New Year's with my family. Some friends wanted to organize a party to get everyone together, since many of us, myself included, had moved away and were only visiting for the holidays. Sarah was invited too. We barely interacted that night, just a quick hi in passing. At one point, I glanced at her and saw her smiling while chatting with a group of women. That smile brought back so many memories. I realized that seeing her smile still made me feel the same way I did the first time I saw it. I thought to myself, how screwed up am I that I still feel this way? Despite those lingering feelings, I was still sad and deeply hurt by how things had ended. Looking back, I also started to blame myself. I should have paid more attention to how she was feeling. I could have told her about the extra work and why I was doing it. Maybe things would have turned out differently. Later that evening, one of my friends mentioned that Sarah's relationship with the guy from her work had only lasted a couple of months. After the holidays, I planned to return to the city where I now lived. My vacation ended on January 6th, so I decided to leave on Friday. That way, I'd have Saturday to sort everything out at home and prepare for the week ahead, with Sunday to relax before going back to work. Before I left, one of my friends from back home called me. He said he had a favor to ask on behalf of someone else and warned me that I wouldn't like it. I could already feel my stomach sinking. Then he told me it was Sarah. She was moving to the same city where I lived to work at her relative's company, and she needed a ride. He asked if I could take her. I didn't even think about it before I said no. The idea of being stuck in a car with her for hours was too much to bear. It would have been painfully awkward, just like the party, and I wasn't ready to put myself through that. He told me that Sarah and I needed to talk, but I wasn't having any of it. I went back home, and last week, I went for a run and stopped to rest a little in a park when I heard a familiar voice say, "Hi." It was Sarah. She tried to start a conversation by asking how I was and mentioning that we didn't get a chance to talk at the party, but I cut her off, saying I didn't want to talk to her. She told me not to be like that we needed to have a conversation, but I said no. She asked how I could still resent her after almost a year and after everything we'd been through, but I told her it wasn't resentment. I was very honest. I told her that thinking about her, talking about her, or even seeing her still hurts a lot, and that's why I couldn't talk to her. She said that was exactly why we needed to talk. I didn't see the point, I just walked away. Since then, Sarah's tried to approach me twice more, and I've shut her down both times. Some of my friends think I'm being too harsh and that I should talk to her for closure. Others say it's not okay to torture her over what happened forever. But that's not what this is about. I don't have any resentment or negative feelings toward her anymore. I even recognize now that I share some of the blame. But it still hurts. I can't talk to her because it's like reopening an old wound that never fully healed. So, AITA for refusing to talk to her. TLDR. My ex, Sarah, broke off our relationship almost a year ago, and I've since moved on as best I can. Recently, she's been trying to talk to me, but I told her I can't because it still hurts too much. Some friends think I'm being too harsh, but I don't resent her, I just don't want to reopen old wounds. AITA for refusing to talk to her. Additional information from OOP after reading comments. OP. Thank you all for your advices. I just want to explain better one thing. My friends are not calling me or messaging me saying that I should talk to her. That's just the opinion of some of them when the subject was brought up. AITA has no consensus bot. OOP was NTA relevant comments. Commenter 1. I don't think you're an AH, but I do think you resent her more than you are willing to admit and haven't actually worked through it internally yet. OOP. You might be right. Sometimes I think I'm totally over it, but then I realize it still haunts me. Commenter 2. Some people might say you need closure, but it seems like you've already processed a lot of the situation, and talking to her could just bring up more pain. You don't owe her anything, especially when it's affecting your well-being. You've already made it clear how you feel, and you're setting boundaries, which is important for healing. OP. That's what I think, but I don't know, sometimes I'm not sure. Commenter 3. Moving to your city, wanting a ride there where you're trapped in the car with her for hours, ignoring your rejections and being persistent? Those are not the actions of someone who wants closure to move on. That's someone trying to wiggle their way back into your good graces. Oop. Good point. Commenter 4. Once was a mistake, twice was a lesson, and a third time's you being stupid. That's like watching the same movie but expecting a different ending. Don't do it to yourself. Oop. There won't be a third time. I was already sure about not going back to her, and you guys' comments are helping me make up my mind about not talking to her. Update. February 2nd, 2025, 6 days later. Hey everyone, I wanted to give an update and thank you all for your input. I took the time to read through every comment, and while I didn't respond to all of them, it was only because I didn't have anything to add. I'm truly grateful for everyone who shared their thoughts. It has been incredibly helpful. After reading everything and thinking it through, I've decided to stick to my decision not to talk to Sarah. Something I forgot to mention in my original post, though I did tell a few commenters, is that I blocked her everywhere after we broke up the second time. Over the last few days, it seems like her persistence has started to backfire. Some of our mutual friends, including the ones who initially told me I should talk to her, have become frustrated with her constant attempts to contact me. Apparently, they've started turning on her because of it. 3 days ago, Emily, the friend I vented to back then, made a post on social media about stalkers. She didn't name Sarah, but a lot of people picked up on what she meant. I've also seen several comments on my original post suggesting that Sarah might have been stalking me. Her job in the same city and her coincidental appearance at the park all line up with that theory. For what it's worth, I know her uncle owns a company here, so maybe that is really why she moved. But honestly, it's not my problem and I'm not gonna look into it. Things have been quieter. Friends have dropped the subject, and Sarah hasn't tried to reach out again. That is, until yesterday. I watched the UFC event with some coworkers. When it ended, I was heading to my car when my phone rang. It was one of our mutual friends calling. She said she had been talking to Sarah and asked if she could pass along a message. I sighed but told her to make it quick. The message was simple. Sarah said she understands why I don't want to talk to her. She promised she wouldn't try to reach out again but added that she still thinks we need to talk. She said the door is open if I ever want to. I told my friend I didn't have a message to pass back and asked her not to bring up Sarah again in our conversations. If what Sarah said is true, it's a relief, but I'm not holding my breath. I wouldn't be surprised if she tries something else. Maybe she thinks giving me space will make me go to her, but it won't. That chapter of my life is closed. Right now, I just want to focus on myself. I probably won't be dating anyone anytime soon. If there is one thing I've learned, it's that I need to get to know people better before jumping into a relationship. I've also been thinking about how loosely I use the word friend. That is another part of my life I need to rethink. Some of the people I have called friends have proven they don't have my best interests at heart. A few people suggested therapy in the comments, and I'll admit, it is something I've been considering. For now, I'm giving myself time to heal on my own, but if I still don't feel right after a while, I will look into it. Thanks again to everyone who took the time to comment. Your advice has been a huge help in sorting all this out. Relevant comments. Commenter 1, good for you for sticking to your boundaries. It sounds like you're taking positive steps for yourself. OP, yes, just moving forward instead of thinking about the past. Commenter 2, it sounds like you are doing well and moving on. Keep focusing on yourself and enjoying what you have. If you feel you need counseling, do it when you are ready. Good luck, OOP. I think now people around me understand my situation and what I truly need. That will help a lot. Commenter 3, this is exactly why monkey branching is a terrible dating practice. It's cheating with extra steps, that's why she keeps pushing. She knows what she did, just like she knows what she lost. Yet, ironically, she's too naive to understand that even if y'all got back together, you don't look at her the same. That's totally understandable. Oop. You're right, it would not be the same. Commenter 4. Good for you with holding to your boundaries. The moment she wasn't getting the amount of attention she wanted, she sought out a coworker to monkey branch to. It was cheating. She wasn't remorseful as she began a relationship with that guy. All she wants now is to act like she didn't cheat on you and rekindle your relationship. She's already proven that she will cheat with whoever shows her attention. That's not someone to be in a relationship with. Have you not dated since the breakup? Personally, that helped me get over my ex-wife who cheated. It's been a year. There's someone special out there for you. Not every woman is like your ex. Good luck. OP. I've dated other women since the breakup, just nothing serious. My family and I were excluded from our longtime friend's annual trip because my son is autistic. What should I do? Original post, 5 years ago, my childhood best friend, 44/male, invited me, my wife, 41/female, and our son on a week-long trip to California with his family and 3 of his college work friends, 42 to 45/male, and their families. I'd met them before and we all got on well enough, so I agreed to it. They knew that my son was autistic before they invited us and were fine with it apparently. The first year we went, my son had a really hard time adjusting but got better as time went on, although he did have a few meltdowns, but everyone acted like it was fine and that they understood and continued to invite us on the trip, and things usually went like that. Earlier this week, my friends said that they wanted to discuss the trip, and I too wanted to discuss the trip because of some concerns I had, mainly one of my friend's teenage daughters who was extremely rude to my son, so I agreed, and when I got there, things were really awkward. No one really said anything, and finally one of the guys just said that they and their families had decided that it would probably be best if we, my family, didn't go on the trip this year? I was completely blindsided and of course asked why, and none of them would come right out and say it directly, but they slyly said it was because of my son. They said that this year, since it was vacation, they wanted to be able to truly relax, and for the past few years they haven't been able to. They also said that this year they really wanted some adult time, since they haven't had any the last few years. Whenever my wife and I went out, our son would have to come too because no one would stay with him, and quite frankly I didn't trust any of the other kids to stay with him, and he had a meltdown once at a restaurant. Their final reason was that some of their kids were uncomfortable. We rent a big house out there, and felt unsafe staying in the house because of one instance where my son did get a little out of hand, one time out of the 4 years, so I did understand the part a bit. Like I said, they never came right out and said it was because of my son, but I knew and it really hurt. This trip is the only time my wife and I ever get away, and they knew that. I think it's pretty sad that a group of adults can't see past a few inconveniences and annoyances from a child who can't help it for a few days, but I know it's a little different to me because I deal with it all of the time. Overall, I'm just angry, hurt, and confused, as is my wife, by all of this because they are supposed to be my friends and I thought they understood everything. I feel like I'm ready to cut ties with all of them and not look back, but my wife thinks that I should tell them all how I truly felt about the situation so that they won't just think it's okay to do that to anyone. I don't really know what I'm asking, whether I'm overreacting, I truly don't think I am, or whether I should just end the friendship now or talk to them first. TLDR. Friends excluded me and my family from our annual trip because my son has autism. I just want to cut them off and be done with it, but my wife thinks I should talk to them and tell them just how unacceptable that is. Top comment. You have every right to feel hurt because we can't control the hands we're dealt. However, I'm inclined to say that your friends do have a valid point. An autistic child is a lot to deal with and not everyone is able to do it. Your point of view is people should accept him because he can't help it, because he's your child and you're used to it. Imagine it from the other point of view. They see it as a child who can randomly go off at any moment, whether he can help it or not. It doesn't matter if it's caused by a disease or just a hyperactive child. They see the potential meltdowns as uncomfortable and awkward. Pretend it wasn't your child. Pretend one of your friend's children has ADHD. His family wants to go on vacation because they're used to it and have learned to tune down his yelling. Would you want to go out with him constantly yelling and making people uncomfortable? Could your friends have been more straightforward in their approach? Yes. At the end of the day, they did a cost-benefit analysis and figured it was better to have peace of mind for their kids and them and decided to cut you. I recommend planning a vacation with your son. There's no reason why y'all can't have a great time as a family somewhere. Update. After thinking hard about it, I decided that I would talk to my friends about everything that happened. We decided to meet again and talk it out. They said that they understood why I was hurt, but weren't even planning on budging in any way. There was no hesitation this time, and one of them, the one with the rude daughter, told me straight out that being around my son was way too stressful and risky, and that this year they refused to constantly walk on eggshells and put their kids at risk for my family's sake. We were never the closest, but I still thought we were friendly enough acquaintances to be respectful to one another, but I guess not, and in the moment we did get into a bit of heated argument and basically nothing got resolved, but my childhood friend did tell me that he doesn't want this to end our friendship and that maybe next year we could all work something out, but quite frankly, I don't really want to go on a trip with any of them, and I left. My wife, when I got home, was happy that I'd talked to them but upset that I even considered trying to come up with a solution to go on a trip where we would not even be wanted, which I understand. As far as my friendship with those guys, I'm not sure where it stands, and if we don't talk in the future it won't bother me too bad since they feel the way they do. I know that a lot of people disagree with me, but if you can't accept my child, then you can't accept me, especially when he's so dependent on me. I am a little disappointed because I thought we were all friends, but maybe it's for the best. TLDR. I talked to my friends, and things didn't go well, but that may be for the best. Top comments. Comment 1. Everyone in your last post said this is how they probably felt and have a right to feel. Almost to the letter. They feel like they have to walk on eggshells. Do you think they should be made to feel like that on their vacation? You feel like they're rejecting your family, and you have a right to feel that way, but it seems like you still haven't looked at the other side of the coin. Comment 2. Your friends don't owe you a vacation. You're demonizing them as if they don't like you or your kid, and you feel that they should accept your son without reservations because his misbehavior is part of his disability. Vacations are not supposed to be stressful, and your son adds stress to their vacation. They are in no way obligated to deal with that. You are, because he is your kid. And guess what? They tried for 4 years to accept the situation and see it from your end. What have you tried? My mom and sister made me reject my dream job to support them, but I later discovered that my mom had illegally drained the college funds Dad left. Have you ever felt like your own family is purposely sabotaging your future? That is exactly what I, 22F, am struggling with right now. My mother, 45F, and sister, 19F, recently pushed me to turn down a fantastic job offer at a major tech company in San Jose, and I'm still trying to absorb what happened. Let me paint you a picture of how we arrived here. 2 years ago, my father died in a vehicle accident on his way home from work. He was the type of father who never missed any of my coding competitions or academic events, even when he was overburdened with work. Every Sunday morning, we had this custom where he'd cook his famous pancakes, which were simply regular pancakes with chocolate chips, but he was so proud of them. He'd tell us stories from his college days while flipping them and cracking us up with his bad dad jokes. Prior to the accident, our family life was not perfect, but it was stable. My parents had troubles, as do all couples, but they balanced each other out nicely. Dad was the calm, analytical kind who could settle any issue with his careful reasoning, whereas Mom was more emotional and impetuous. They made it work, and our home felt secure and predictable. Everything changed following Dad's death. It wasn't simply the evident loss, it was as if our entire family dynamic had collapsed. Mom became emotionally dependent on my younger sister Ashley, or perhaps the other way around. Regardless, they created a tight, even smothering bond that made me feel like an alien in my own family. Ashley became the focus of Mom's universe, while I was consigned to the role of the responsible one, expected to give up everything for the family's sake. I should clarify about Ashley. Even before Dad died, she was always the most theatrical member of the family. I was the quiet kid who spent hours coding in my room, while she was the social butterfly who required constant attention. Dad used to balance Mom's tendency to accommodate Ashley's every desire, but now he was gone, there was no one to provide a reality check. Their relationship evolved gradually but unmistakably. Ashley's little crises escalated into family emergencies. When she didn't make the cheerleading squad in her senior year of high school, her mother let her miss school for a week and maxed up her credit card with comfort items. When she didn't get into her first choice institution, Mom spent 2 weeks calling administrators and even applying for a loan to make a donation to the school. Meanwhile, I tried to keep everything together. I maintained a 4.0 GPA in computer science, worked part-time at the university's IT department to help pay bills, and cared for my younger brother, Tommy, 10 million. Tommy is such a sweet kid. He's the only one who still sees me as a real person, rather than a tool to be utilized when necessary. I graduated from college this year with a computer science degree, and against all chances, I received an incredible job offer from one of San Jose's top IT businesses. The interview process was harsh, with 6 rounds of technical interviews, coding challenges, and behavioral tests. I prepared for months, staying up late to learn algorithms and data structures while also fulfilling my family responsibilities. When I received the offer letter, I couldn't believe my eyes. The base salary was $125,000, plus a signing bonus and stock options that made my head spin. This wasn't simply a job. It was an opportunity to establish a legitimate career and possibly even aid my family financially. Once I was established, I could finally repay all of my student loans, which Mom couldn't co-sign for because she was too busy paying off Ashley's shopping bills. But last week, Mom entered my room with that expression on her face, as if she were going to explode a bomb that would destroy everything. She sat on my bed, took up the plush penguin Dad bought me for my 16th birthday, one of the few things I still have from him, and said, "Olivia, we need to talk about your job offer." My stomach immediately sank. She went on to tell me that Ashley was struggling with her first year of college and needed to take a vacation. She apparently has anxiety and needs to return home. This entails additional expenses, which Mom cannot handle alone. She advised me to ignore the San Jose offer and seek a local job instead so that I could help with the finances and care for Tommy. Ashley's worry manifests itself mysteriously when things don't go her way. She had no issue performing in a 3-hour dance showcase last month, but when her teachers required her to attend morning courses, she experienced crippling social anxiety. She can spend hours at parties with her friends, documenting every second to Instagram, yet she supposedly has panic attacks when it comes time to study for tests. I tried to reason with Mom. I spent hours showing her my financial plans, explaining how I would send money home once I had settled in, and even promising to assist Ashley in finding resources for her purported mental health difficulties. But Mom would not hear it. Family comes first, she kept stressing, as if my desires and goals were not important to the family's well-being. What is the worst part? While I was talking with Mom, Ashley was in her room, sharing images of her recent shopping trip on Instagram. The same sibling who claims she is too anxious to continue college spent hundreds of dollars on new clothes and makeup. I saw the receipts in her email. Yes, we have a family computer. She spent $876 at Sephora last week. That's more than I've spent on groceries in 2 months. When I pointed this up to Mom, she became defensive. Ashley is sensitive. She needs these things to feel better, she told me. You've always been the strong one, Olivia. You can handle disappointment better. That's when it struck me. I was the strong one in this family, which meant that my feelings and dreams were irrelevant. The following days were a flurry of anxiety and desperate planning. I contacted my college advisor, who was outraged by the scenario but couldn't provide much assistance. I called the company's HR department to explain my predicament and request additional time, but they could only extend the deadline by a few days. Without family assistance or a co-signer for an apartment contract in San Jose, my options were quickly dwindling. I even attempted to appeal to Mom's sensible side. I produced a detailed spreadsheet demonstrating how my San Jose salary will benefit the family more in the long run than a local job paying half the amount. I looked for local therapists that could help Ashley cope with her anxiety while still allowing her to attend school. I volunteered to schedule regular video conversations with Tommy to keep involved in his life. Nothing worked. How did Mom respond? Your father would be so disappointed in you for being so selfish. It stung more than anything else. Dad was the one who bought my first computer, stayed up late to help me debug my first programs, and always encouraged me to dream big. Using his memory to control me seemed like a new low. That's when something unexpected occurred. My Uncle James, 42 million, Dad's younger brother, arrived abruptly at our doorstep yesterday. He's always been the cool uncle who pays attention, but we hadn't seen much of him since Dad's burial. He'd apparently been trying to call Mom for weeks, but she was ignoring him. He looked at my face and knew something was amiss. While Mom was preoccupied with Ashley's current crisis, She was crying because someone had unfollowed her on Instagram. Uncle James and I sat on the back porch, where Dad used to educate me about constellations on clear evenings. I told him everything. I told him about the job offer, Mom's demands, Ashley's spending habits, and how I felt as if my future was slipping away. Tommy came out to join us as I was speaking, cuddling up next to me as he often does when he notices I'm angry. He's incredibly perceptive for a 10-year-old. Tommy acquired Dad's quiet brilliance and empathy, whilst Ashley inherited Mom's dramatic tendencies. Since Dad's death, he has been my primary source of genuine affection in this house. Instead of simply sympathizing, Uncle James had a determined expression in his eyes, similar to how Dad would appear when he was solving a problem. "Your dad would never have wanted this for you," he replied, his voice firm but gentle. Then he made me an offer that would change everything. He has a guest home near his business in a city about an hour from San Jose, and he's prepared to let me stay there for free until I get established. He even offered to co-sign any required loans. While we were conversing, I received a text from my probable future manager at the IT company. She stated she was impressed with my interviews and was excited to have me on the team. They are working on several cutting-edge AI initiatives that are completely aligned with my interests. Reading that message while sitting next to the lone adult who seemed to care about my future felt like the universe was sending me a signal. For the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful. However, when we informed Mom about this possibility, she exploded. The transition was sudden and frightening. She transformed from the passive-aggressive manipulator I had become accustomed to into someone I hardly knew. She accused me of leaving my family, called me selfish, and then dropped a bombshell I didn't see coming. "You're just like your father, always putting yourself first." Uncle James intervened quickly, telling Mom she was out of line. He reminded her that Dad had worked tirelessly to support this family. That he had taken the late shift at work, the one he was driving home from when the tragedy occurred, in order to pay for Ashley's dance lessons. The fight that followed was heated, with Ashley joining in to call me selfish and Tommy crying in the corner. The things Mom said during that dispute indicated a lot about how she truly regards me. Apparently, I was always difficult, even as a child. My concentrate on academics rather than socializing was unusual. Even my decision to study computer technology rather than something more suitable for a girl was indicative of my defiance. It seemed as if years of animosity had finally been released. I'm currently sitting in my room, surrounded by half-packed boxes. Uncle James demanded I begin packing just in case, and I'm now trying to figure out what to do next. On one side of my laptop screen, there is a job offer letter, and on the other, there are San Jose apartment ads. The deadline is tomorrow at 5 p.m., Pacific Standard Time. Uncle James is downstairs, ready to assist me if I decide to move out. But Mom's warning to cut me off completely if I leave still rings in my ears. Tommy left a note under my door a few minutes ago. In his shaky handwriting, he wrote, "I love you, Olivia. Dad would want you to be happy." I'm trying not to cry on the page while I type this. I realize this is long, but I needed to get it out. I understand that this is tricky, but am I wrong in wanting to take advantage of this opportunity? Should I give up my work to keep the family at peace, or should I accept Uncle James' offer and risk ruining my connection with Mom and Ashley? I've spent my entire life being responsible, dependable, and willing to make sacrifices. For once, I'd like to select myself. But my guilt is eating me alive. What if Mom is correct? What if I'm being selfish? I will provide an update after I have reached a decision. My hands are shaking so terribly that I can hardly type this. Thank you for reading. If you've made it this far, any advice is welcome. Update 1. First and foremost, I'd want to thank everyone who left positive comments on my previous post. Your remarks provided me the strength to make a decision. I chose to accept the job offer and seek Uncle James' assistance. But what occurred next completely surprised me. The morning after I made my decision, I got up early to begin transferring my belongings. Mom and Ashley weren't talking to me, as I expected. I didn't expect to see my laptop missing from my desk. Following a frenzied hunt, I discovered it in Ashley's room. She attempted to send an email denying my employment offer from my account. Thankfully, she was unaware of the two-factor authentication I had set up. When confronted, Mom defended her. Ashley was just trying to protect our family. That was the moment I knew I had made the correct decision. Uncle James helped me load everything into his vehicle while Mom and Ashley watched from the window, not even coming down to say goodbye. Only Tommy ran out to hug me, putting his favorite action figure in my pocket and murmuring, "For good luck." The drive to Uncle James' house was relatively peaceful. He didn't force me to communicate, just let me analyze everything while my favorite indie rock station played softly in the background. It reminded me of drives I used to take with Dad to clear my mind. Getting situated in the guest house was weird. It's little but ideal for me. A studio with a tiny kitchen and a workstation by the window. Uncle James had already set up a workstation for me, complete with 2 monitors. Your dad would have wanted you to have the right setup, he told me. The true shock occurred as I was organizing my documents for the new employment. I discovered an old envelope in Dad's work briefcase that Uncle James had kept in storage. Inside were letters from Dad to each of us kids, intended to be opened when we turned 25. I know I shouldn't have opened mine so early, but with everything going on, I needed some connection with him. The letter altered everything. Dad described his own experiences with family pressure. When he was younger, his parents wanted him to take over their modest business, but he chose to study engineering instead. He wrote about how happy he was of my interest in technology and hoped I'd have the fortitude to pursue my aspirations, even if it meant making difficult decisions. But there was something else in the envelope, bank statements indicating that Dad had established a separate savings account for my college tuition. I never known about this account. It had enough money to cover at least 2 years' tuition. When I showed these to Uncle James, his expression worsened. He made several calls and discovered that Mom had somehow gotten access to this account after Dad died and fully depleted it. I started a new job yesterday. The staff is great, and the projects are even more exciting than I anticipated. My boss personally led me around and introduced me to everyone. During lunch, she mentioned that she had been pulling for me since my interview, especially when I solved a particularly difficult coding problem in an unusual manner. Mom has been phoning non-stop since I left, leaving voicemails alternating between guilt and rage. Ashley wrote a lengthy diatribe on social media about how I had abandoned the family. I've blocked them both for now. I need room to concentrate on my fresh beginning. Uncle James helped me open a separate bank account from Mom's, and I'm learning about financial independence from a coworker who also offers personal finance classes. I am also looking at therapy choices that are covered by my new health insurance. The toughest part is missing Tommy. We video chat every night before his bedtime while Mom attends her evening yoga session. He had been telling me about his science project, and his eyes brightened up when I offered to help him code a simple game for it. I keep rereading Dad's letter anytime I'm feeling guilty. One line in particular stands out. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose your own path, even when others try to hold you back out of their own fear. There's more to look into with the education fund, and Uncle James is assisting me in gathering information. I'll provide another update once I have more information. For the time being, I'm focusing on learning my new work and creating my new life, one day at a time. Update number 2. It has been 3 weeks since my previous update. I regret for the delay, but what I discovered necessitated thorough investigation and legal consulting before I felt safe publishing. Remember the college fund that I mentioned discovering in Dad's papers? Uncle James and I have spent the past few weeks trying to figure out what happened to that money. What we discovered was far worse than we had feared. With the help of Dad's old bank colleague, we discovered that Mom had not only accessed one account, but had systematically depleted multiple accounts Dad had set up. There was a college fund for me, another for Tommy's future schooling, and a general emergency fund. All were emptied within months following Dad's death. Last week, Mom sent me a lengthy email. She sought to get ahead of the narrative, indicating that she was aware we were investigating. The email began with a half-hearted apology for possibly being too harsh, but gradually evolved into something else entirely. She left a message. There's something you need to know about your father. When I was pregnant with you, he had an affair. The note went on to explain how she uncovered the affair, how Dad begged forgiveness, and how she graciously accepted him back. She said that this was why she was always aloof from me, because I reminded her of that difficult time. She concluded by offering that if I discontinued my research into the accounts, we could focus on repairing our relationship. Here's the thing, her story didn't add up. Uncle James and I dug through Dad's old records and discovered something unusual. While Mom alleged Dad was having an affair, he was actually working double shifts to pay off Mom's credit card debt. We discovered old credit card statements with enormous charges from that time period, all made by Mom. The major surprise occurred when we realized Dad's old email address was still operational. We discovered years of correspondence with his lawyer discussing his concerns about Mom's spending habits. He had been recording everything, safeguarding valuables, and opening separate accounts for his children's future. He was not having an affair. He was attempting to shield us from Mom's fiscal carelessness. The emails also revealed something heartbreaking. Dad had planned to leave Mom, not for another woman, but because he was concerned about her influence on the kids. The accident occurred only 2 weeks before he planned to file for divorce. I took all of this material to the lawyer that Uncle James recommended. She was appalled. Apparently, what Mom did with the accounts following Dad's death was not only immoral, but unlawful. She had fabricated documents to obtain access to accounts that she was not permitted to touch. The lawyer discovered something else concerning Ashley's alleged college fees, which Mom had stated as the reason she required my assistance. The majority of that money went toward shopping sprees and luxury things. We discovered credit card bills indicating purchases at high-end retailers, spa treatments, and even a secret spring break trip to Cancun, all while Ashley was allegedly too anxious to attend lectures. I spent hours scrolling through Ashley's social media posts, chronicling every extravagant purchase, luxury vacation, and shopping spree. The time frame coincides exactly with the loss of monies from Dad's accounts. Mom wasn't just allowing Ashley's behavior, she was sponsoring it with money that was legally intended for all of us. The lawyer claims we have a good case of financial fraud. The data left by Dad, together with the paper trail of Mom's activities following his death, creates a clear picture of systematic theft and deception. Tommy's predicament is what concerns me the most right now. He's still living in that toxic environment, seeing Mom and Ashley spend money that should have gone for his future. Uncle James is exploring our options for obtaining custody. The lawyer believes we may have a case, particularly given the financial malfeasance. I have not responded to Mom's email yet. The lawyer advised against any direct communication at this time. But Mom and Ashley must have sensed something is amiss because they've launched a social media smear campaign against me, portraying me as an ungrateful daughter who abandoned her family for a high-paying tech career. The truth is that learning of Dad's impending divorce has been both painful and validating. Painful because Dad died before he could shield us from Mom's destructive actions. Validating, because it proves he witnessed what was going on. He was not immune to Mom's manipulation and financial abuse. He was actively attempting to stop it. I'm preparing all of the documentation for legal action. Uncle James has been great throughout this process, spending countless hours assisting me in building our case. My employment is going well, and my team has been understanding of my need for occasional personal time to deal with things. The coming weeks will be critical as we move forward with legal processes. I'll post another update when I can, but for the time being, I need to focus on constructing our case and staying emotionally healthy through it all. My company's health insurance provides therapy, so I started seeing someone to help me digest things. At least I now know the truth. Dad was not the villain in Mom's story. He tried to be our hero to the end. Update 3. The previous 6 weeks have been a blur of legal proceedings, life changes, and final decisions. What began with discovering Dad's buried letter has resulted in a full overhaul of our lives. The court case moved quickly, thanks to the tremendous evidence we had. The judge was particularly concerned about Mom's methodical depletion of Tommy's education money. The most incriminating evidence came from Mom's scrupulous record-keeping. She had documented every unlawful transfer in her personal planner, most likely never expecting anyone to discover it. When Mom was presented with the evidence in court, her veneer finally shattered. She admitted to everything. Forging paperwork to get into Dad's finances, misusing the insurance funds, systematically concealing financial records. The judge's decision was straightforward: full restoration of all diverted cash, plus interest. Mom is currently facing criminal charges for fraud. Ashley's reaction was revealing. Instead of supporting Mom, she quickly distanced herself, claiming she had no idea where the money for her shopping spree came from. Her Instagram influencer hopes were dashed when the court ordered her to return all products purchased with misappropriated monies. The biggest success, however, was not a financial settlement, it was gaining custody of Tommy. When the judge recognized Mom's record of financial abuse and manipulation, as well as evidence of her continuous destructive conduct, she granted me interim custody, with Uncle James serving as co-guardian. Tommy moved in with me last week, and the difference is already evident. He's smiling more, sleeping better, and is enthused about the coding projects we're working on together. My career has accelerated in ways I never expected. My initiative has piqued the interest of high management, and I have been elevated to team leader. The steadiness of my employment and income played a crucial role in the custody decision. Mom made one final attempt at manipulation, vowing to forgive everything provided I dropped the accusations and returned Tommy. Her lawyer instructed her to stop when I provided recordings of her threatening phone calls. Ashley has been posting passive-aggressive posts about toxic family members and treachery, but her power has diminished since she was forced to return her costly outfit. She's moved in with a friend, refusing to live with Mom now that the money has run out. Uncle James has been my rock throughout this. He's helped Tommy set up his new room, located him a terrific school nearby, and even opened a new college fund for him, which Mom can't access. We have weekly family dinners where we talk about Dad's pleasant memories, which are slowly healing after years of manipulation. The guest house has become our home. Tommy's room is filled in science posters and programming flowcharts that we created together. He's joined a robotics club at his new school, and his passion reminds me of Dad. I started therapy to analyze everything, and it's helping me realize that none of this was my fault. Dad tried to protect us. And now I'm completing what he started. Looking back at my initial post, I can't believe how far we've come, from nearly giving up on my aspirations to now completely realizing them while providing Tommy with the secure home he deserves. Mother and Ashley's true colors were shown. But by losing them, we gained something far more valuable. Truth and freedom. To those who may be in similar situations, believe your intuition. If something feels off, it probably is. Sometimes the family you choose is more significant than the one you are born into. Thank you for giving me the courage to research while my world was collapsing. Your encouragement gave me the courage to fight for justice, not just for myself, but for Tommy and Dad's memory. You transformed our life. I paid my sister and her fiancé's rent for years, only to learn they mocked me behind my back. I cut them off, and karma hit. Yes, you heard that correctly. Rent. It wasn't as if they provided me with a place to reside. It was the opposite. I was sending them $800 each month to assist pay their home and bills. It all began roughly 3 years ago. Emma and her fiancé, Jared, were going through a difficult time financially. They were drowning in debt, and I could tell they were too proud to seek help. I had recently taken a job teaching high school. The salary wasn't terrific, but I wasn't married and didn't have any children, so I thought I could afford it. What's the point of having siblings? I offered to help them for a bit until they could get back on their feet. They were grateful, or so I thought. However, the interim arrangement dragged on. A month turned into 6. 6 months turned into 12. And then it hit me. 3 years of giving money every month, without fail. I restructured my entire life around it, no large purchases, no trips, simply living frugally to keep things going. Still, I did not complain. I knew I was doing the correct thing. Family comes first, always. Then followed the wedding announcement. They were finally getting married after all these years, and I thought, okay, this is a watershed moment. I secretly wished they'd tell me they didn't need my assistance anymore. Instead, Emma called me one day and asked if I could help with her wedding expenses. I'll never forget that call. I hesitated for a long time before telling her no. Emma, I already send you $800 a month. I can't do more than that, I told her. She became silent. I'm not sure what she wanted me to say, but I needed to draw the line someplace. Dad's birthday. The truth emerges. Fast forward 2 months to my father's birthday. We held a large family gathering at Grandma's place. It was the usual chaos, tons of food, kids running around, and folks debating whose barbecue sauce was superior. Emma and Jared appeared carefree. We were all in excellent spirits, enjoying beverages and discussing old family stories. Everything appeared normal. Toward the conclusion of the event, my grandmother approached and caressed my arm. "Brian, can we talk outside for a minute?" she said gently. I didn't think much about it. Grandma is known for her little heart-to-heart conversations. It can be life advice or simply a word of encouragement. I believed she was going to encourage me to settle down. She was always wondering when I was going to find a good girl and start a family. We strolled onto the porch, which was quieter. She looked around to ensure no one was listening in. Then she said something that struck me like a punch to the belly. "They made fun of you," she replied quietly. "Who?" I inquired, wondering. "Emma and Jared. They laughed behind your back." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" She paused before speaking. "They think you're stuck in life. That you'll never have a family of your own. That you're wasting your time trying to help them. They joke about how much you sacrifice while you live alone and struggle to be a teacher." I felt a tightness in my chest. I could not believe it. I had given so much for them, and this is how they perceived me? Some kind of loser who should be pitied and mocked at? I stood there in silence, taking in her words. Grandma stared at me with sad, knowing eyes. "Brian, you're a good man," she added softly. Grandma responded. "But you don't have to let them treat you like this. They're taking advantage of your kindness." I nodded, still stunned. What should I do with this information? Confront them in front of everybody? Ruin the evening? I was not going to let them have the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. Instead, I went back inside, smiled, and pretended everything was fine. I even clinked glasses with Jared when we celebrated Dad's birthday. However, within, everything had altered. I realized I couldn't continue living like this. Did they think I was a joke? Fine. Let's see how hilarious things get if the money stops rolling in. I wasn't going to lose my cool. I'd play it smart and keep it elegant. But they were soon to discover that I was no pushover. The fallout begins. The morning following Dad's birthday party, I awoke early, still thinking about what Grandma had said. Part of me wanted to call Emma immediately afterward and confront her, but I opted not to. I needed time to contemplate. Instead, I went about my usual business: coffee, lesson preparations, and grading papers. Business as usual. About a week later, Emma called me. "Hey, Brian. Just checking in," she remarked cheerfully, as if nothing were wrong. "Hey," I said, maintaining a neutral tone. She began droning on about wedding plans, flowers, guest lists, and an issue with the caterer. I let her speak for a while. Then she casually mentioned money. "Oh, and Jared was wondering if you could send this month's rent a little early. We have a few things coming up." I had to fight myself not to chuckle. "Yeah, about that. I'm actually going through some financial stuff myself," I commented. "I won't be able to send the money this month." There was a pause. "Wait, you mean just this month, right? You'll still help us after that?" "I don't know, Emma. I've been helping for 3 years. I might need to focus on my own situation for a while." She remained silent for a moment. Then I noticed her voice thicken. "Brian, are you serious? We're counting on this money." "Yeah, well, I was counting on my family not laughing behind my back." Another prolonged stillness. I didn't elaborate, and she never asked what I meant. Instead, she uttered a stiff, "Okay," and abruptly terminated the phone. That marked the beginning of the fallout. The family pressure. 2 weeks have gone by. I didn't hear from Emma again, but I knew something was up. Then, one night, my mom called me unexpectedly. "Brian, I just talked to Emma," she said, and I could see she wasn't happy. "She says you stopped helping her with her bills. What's going on?" I exhaled. "Mom, I've been sending them $800 a month for 3 years. It's not like I owe them anything." "Well, yeah, but they're family, and Emma said you've been acting distant." "Did she also mention that they've been making fun of me behind my back?" I asked her. That silenced her for a second. "What are you talking about?" I told her what Grandma said. For a time, there was only astonished stillness on the other end. Finally, she spoke again, this time in a gentler voice. "Brian, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. You've done more for them than anyone could have expected. If they're treating you like this, I understand why you're upset." It was a relief to hear her say that. But I knew things were going to get ugly. The confrontation. Sure enough, a few days later, Jared called me unexpectedly. "Hey, Brian," he said, his tone forced but courteous. "Emma's really upset. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "Is that right?" I asked, maintaining my composure. "Yeah, man. I don't know where you're getting these ideas, but we've never said anything bad about you. You've been great to us." "Oh, so Grandma just made that up?" I inquired honestly. Jared stammered for a second. "Look, if she said something, it was probably twisted. You know how old people can exaggerate." I didn't believe it for a second. "You know what, Jared? Let's not pretend. I'm done with the money. You guys are on your own. I hope the wedding goes well." I hung up before he could argue. Grandmother's revelation. The real kicker arrived a few days later, when I received a call from Grandma herself. "Brian, honey, can you come over? I have something to show you," she said to him. Curious, I went to her residence. She walked me into her study and gave me an old family photo album. "I was going through some things and found these," she explained with a slight smile. I flipped through the pages and came across a collection of childhood images of me, Emma, and Jared. Then I noticed something unexpected. A letter slipped between the pages. It was from more than 20 years ago, before I was even born. "Grandma, what is this?" I questioned, pulling it out. "Read it," she replied softly. The letter came from my late grandfather, and it detailed a hidden trust fund he had established for his grandchildren, to be distributed equally. Unless one is found to be abusing the family bond. "Emma and Jared don't know about this," Grandma continued quietly. "But I think you should." I sat there, startled. It wasn't simply about money anymore. This was about setting boundaries. And perhaps karma was about to catch up with them. The fallout escalates. Grandma showed me the letter, and I had a lot to think about. My late grandfather had established a trust fund for all of us, but she did not disclose how much money was in it. She made it obvious that no one else in the family knew, not Emma, Jared, or my parents. "Why are you telling me this now?" I questioned her. Grandmother gave me a knowing glance. Because I want you to understand something. You're not the failure they make you out to be. You've worked hard, sacrificed for others, and shown more integrity than most people ever would. This fund, it was meant to reward people like you. I nodded carefully, absorbing her words. I didn't want to rush into anything based on this new information, but it was comforting to know that I had some concealed leverage. Emma and Jared panic. The drama became more intense during the next week. Emma and Jared were panicking, I learned through the family grapevine. I believe limiting their monthly allowance affected them harder than I expected. Jared's work hours had been reduced, and Emma was having difficulty paying some of the wedding providers. I assumed they would figure it out. Instead, they began attempting to guilt other family members into giving them money. It backfired spectacularly. My mother stated to one of her sisters that I had been financially supporting Emma and Jared for several years. Word spread immediately. Everyone in the family found out pretty quickly. My Aunt Laura, who never holds back, supposedly ripped into Emma during a family function I wasn't even attending. "You let Brian pay your bills for 3 years, and now you're playing the victim? Are you serious?" she allegedly said. Emma loses it. Emma called me later, enraged. "What the hell, Brian? Did you tell everyone about the money?" "No," I said quietly. "I only told one person. And you brought this on yourself." "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" she asked. "Emma, I think you have bigger problems than embarrassment," I told you. "Maybe look in the mirror and ask yourself why you believed it was acceptable to treat me as a joke." She did not have a response. I assumed that was the end of it, but Jared decided to push things. He must have been desperate because he showed up unexpectedly at my school one afternoon. He waited for me in the parking lot. "Brian, we need to talk," he replied, trying to seem calm but clearly agitated within. "About what?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Look, man, Emma has been crying non-stop. People are turning against us. We just want to make things right," he explained. "Oh, you want to make something right now? After 3 years of taking my money while laughing behind my back?" I shake my head. "No thank you, Jared. I am done being your safety net." His cheeks reddened. "You act as if we intended to hurt you. It wasn't like this?" "So, how was it, Jared?" I interrupted. "Explain to me how ridiculing someone who helps you isn't intended to hurt them." He did not have a positive response. Instead, he muttered something about how everything was a misunderstanding and walked out. Dad steps in. Later that night, I received a call from my father. He rarely participates in drama, so I knew this was serious. "Brian," he explained. "I had a lengthy conversation with Emma and Jared. They are struggling right now, but they regret how they treated you." "That's good," I replied frankly. "But I'm not interested in fixing things right now. They need to solve their own difficulties." Dad exhaled. "Look, I am not saying you are incorrect. You've been more than generous, but maybe it's time to sit down and have a serious conversation with them, clear the air." I thought for a moment. "I'll think about it," I finally said. But deep down, I was not in a forgiving mood. They had been using me for several years. They'd have to prove they deserved another opportunity. And I wasn't going to make things easy for them. Our family meeting. About a week following my father's call, I received an invitation. Handwritten. That was odd. It came from Emma. She asked me to meet her and Jared at a coffee shop near their house for a family meeting. I contemplated going, but curiosity got the better of me. I assumed I'd listen to them, despite my low expectations. When I arrived, the cafe was almost completely vacant. Emma and Jared were already there, looking a little overly prepared. Emma wore a phony smile, and Jared fidgeted with his phone. Emma remarked, "Hey, thanks for coming," as I sat down. "Sure, what is this about?" I asked, keeping it brief. Emma took a big breath. "Look, we'd simply like to apologize. We shouldn't have talked about you that way. It was wrong, and we sincerely apologize." Jared nodded and joined in. "We were agitated and told some horrible jokes. We didn't mean anything serious." I sat back and observed them. It all felt too polished and scripted. "Okay," I said. "But let me ask you a question. If Grandma hadn't told me, would you have ever apologized?" They froze for a second. Emma looked to Jared, who swiftly spoke out. "Of course we would have, eventually." I chuckled. "Right. Sure." They shifted uncomfortably. That's when Emma revealed the true reason for the meeting. "The favor, Brian, we need a favor," she explained cautiously. There it was. I almost laughed aloud. "Let me guess. You need money." "Not exactly," Emma responded nervously. "We need you to co-sign a loan for us." I stared at her like she had a second head. Are you serious? We've struck a hard patch, Jared explained. And we just need some help refinancing the house. If you co-sign, we'll obtain a better rate, and we'll handle the rest. You would not have to pay anything. I couldn't believe what I heard. You've got to be kidding me, I responded. You think I'm going to put my name on a loan for you after all this? Are you listening to yourself right now? Emma's face reddened. We are not trying to take advantage of you. We're working to make things right. I shook my head in astonishment. You don't solve problems by begging for more handouts. You fix things by accepting responsibility for your own lives. Jared threw his hand down on the table. You are being unreasonable, Brian. We are family. I laughed bitterly. Exactly. And family members do not treat each other like dirt. You are on your own. I got up, tossed a couple bucks on the table for my coffee, and went out without saying anything. The bombshell. A few days later, the unexpected news broke. Grandma called me, sounding shaken. Brian, you should come over right away. It's important, she remarked. When I got to her house, she handed me an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a letter from the bank regarding the trust fund. Emma and Jared had apparently caught wind of it and were attempting to demand a larger share, claiming that I had withheld family assets. They went to a lawyer, Grandma said, her voice shaking with fury. They say you hid the trust fund from them, even though you didn't know about it until recently. I was stunned. You've got to be kidding me. They are desperate, Brian. They're grasping for straws, she remarked. But this is low, even for them? Then it struck me. They weren't only struggling. They were sinking. And now they're willing to throw me under the bus to save themselves. I'm not going to let them get away with this, I stated forcefully. Grandma smiled a little sadly. Good. It's about time someone teaches them a lesson. An unexpected call. I wasn't done being surprised though. The next morning, I received a call from a lawyer representing Emma and Jared. I readied myself for a heated argument, but the lawyer sounded unexpectedly sorry. Mr. Daniels, he replied. I wanted to inform you that my clients have chosen to abandon their complaint. They'd like to handle the situation privately. Withdraw their claim? Why? There was an awkward moment. Let's just say some fresh information has surfaced about their financial predicament. I believe they knew they were in no position to pursue it legally. I couldn't help wondering what had happened. Later that day, I heard from Aunt Laura. Apparently, Jared was sacked when someone anonymously claimed that he had been embezzling minor quantities of company money. To make matters worse, the bank flatly refused their loan application, citing credit worries. Karma had struck them severely. And I had not even moved a finger. Emma's final attempt a few days after the trust claim disaster, I was still processing everything when Emma texted me. We should talk, please. I ignored her. The next day, she showed up at my residence unexpectedly. She was pacing outside my building when I returned home from work. I sighed and stepped out of the car. What do you want, Emma? I asked, already fatigued. She appeared frustrated. Brian, I didn't realize Jared was going to go this far with the lawyer. I swear I did not want this to happen. Did he panic? I scoffed. You were both perfectly happy attempting to rip me off with that trust fund. She stared down at her feet and did not refute it. I'm sorry. Okay? We've just been under so much stress, the wedding expenses, the house, everything is coming apart. I folded my arms. You know who's at fault, right? I shot back. Perhaps you wouldn't be in this situation if you hadn't relied on me for so long. She winced and then, unexpectedly, added, You're correct. But I have no one else to turn to. I looked at her in bewilderment. You don't understand, do you? I am done. I gave you years of my life and thousands of dollars, and you just laughed behind my back. Now you came here expecting me to save you again? Brian, you're my brother, she whispered quietly. We're supposed to look out for each other. Yeah? Where was that support when you and Jared made fun of me? When did you attempt to take it from me? She did not have a response. I shook my head. Emma, I'm finished. This will be our last conversation regarding money, trust funds, or anything else. I don't want anything more to do with you or Jared. Her eyes widened. You can't simply cut me off like that. We are family. Watch me. With that, I walked inside, leaving her standing there. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, but it was enough. Grandma takes a stand. The next day, Grandma called. She had heard everything, and nothing in our family keeps a secret for long. Brian, I want you to know something, she stated. I've decided I'm not going to talk to Emma or Jared anymore, at least not for a long time. I was startled. Grandma, you don't have to do that for me. I do, she stated firmly. You've been nothing but wonderful to them, yet they attempted to betray you. If they don't respect you, they won't respect me. They crossed the line, and I am not going to pretend differently. Hearing that from her meant more than I could express. Aunt Laura's news. A few weeks later, I received another surprise. I ran into Aunt Laura at the grocery store, and she took me aside. Hello, I heard about everything that happened. I just wanted to tell you how proud I am of you, she said. Proud of me? I asked, perplexed. Yes, you have finally stood up for yourself. Emma had a knack of manipulating people, but you didn't let her take advantage of you. I laughed. It wasn't easy, but I couldn't live like that anymore. You did the right thing. By the way, you might want to check in with Grandma. She's making some modifications to the trust fund. That grabbed my attention. Changes? Laura laughed. Let's just say Emma and Jared might not be included in the future plans. Grandmother's final decision. When I saw Grandma a few days later, she verified it. I talked to the lawyer, she added, and I've determined that if Emma and Jared can't demonstrate responsibility and respect, they won't earn their share of the trust. I'm giving them the opportunity to change, but if they don't, the trust will be divided between you and your cousins instead. I was speechless for a moment. You don't need to do that, Grandma. I do not want any of the money. I know, she responded, smiling. That's why you deserve it. Cut ties for good. Following that, I cut off all communication with Emma and Jared. No texts, no calls. I banned their numbers and quit dealing with family drama. Things gradually became easier, and I had no idea how heavy my weight was until it was lifted. The actual kicker? Jared had moved out of the house after losing his job, and their relationship was on the rocks, so Emma had to return to live with her mother. I wasn't happy about it, but I couldn't ignore the irony.